it. Our first post comes from a throwaway account. A wife notices her husband sneaking out late at night, something he thinks she hasn't caught on to. At first, she brushes it off, but the more she pays attention, the stranger it gets. What she finds out? Well, it's not what you'd expect. Obviously using a throwaway account because, yeah. So, over the past few months, I've noticed my husband sneaking out of the house at night, sometimes for hours at a time. I'm one of those people that fall asleep as soon as their head hits the pillow, so he obviously thinks I'm asleep. But one night I heard the baby crying and noticed he wasn't there. At first I thought he was sneaking out to see another woman, but it turns out it was worse than that. In my opinion anyway. We had our first child in February this year, and he's been a really hands-on father. He's always there to take care of the baby despite having a full-time job when I need a break and all that. I don't know how else to really say what he's doing without it sounding completely insane, because it kind of is. But it turns out, when my husband goes out at night, all he does is go into the yard where the trash cans are, rummages around, and fishes out a dirty diaper from our child, opens it, and just stands there smelling it. It seems to only be the ones that our son has gone number 2 in, because I've seen him toss back ones that presumably only have been peed in and look for a dirtier one, and then he just stands there, taking these deep, contented breaths in of the excrement. For ages. The sad thing is, he looks so damn happy when he's doing it too. I've watched him from the window for weeks now, just standing out there, sniffing with this huge grin on his face, and then rummaging around for another. The real icing on the cake was the other night when he came back to bed, once again thinking I was asleep. He must have got a bit too close to the diaper when he was sniffing our son's business, because when he got into bed with me, I could smell something, and opened my eyes a bit when I finally heard him snoring. It turns out he had a bit of poop on his nose. I felt so disgusted. So, I'm at a loss as to what I should do now. I love my husband, but this freaks the hell out of me. Has this happened to anyone else before? Is it a fetish or something? I'm too scared to confront him, but I know it needs to be done, and any advice would be great because, shit. Unsurprisingly, the comments seem a bit speechless. Wow, that is a really interesting situation. You probably should talk to your husband about it. Well, yeah. Counselling? Hell, this is a first for me, and maybe the internet. Others, on the other hand, don't think too much about it. Seems harmless enough, just very odd. This isn't extremely abnormal, simply confront him with an open heart or mind. His view of the situation will affect yours. The OP would later post an update on the situation, where she confronted her husband about his dirty little secret. Basically, a few nights after I posted my last edit on the previous post, I gathered the courage to confront my husband. In hindsight, it might not have been the best way to do it, but at the time it seemed logical and the least confronting way I could, with still providing proof for me and my husband to see. So that night, I took some pictures with my iPhone and a short video out our bedroom window of my husband outside. It was blurry and hard to see, but enough for him to understand I knew what was going on. I waited for him on our bed with the evidence for a good 45 minutes before he came back upstairs. I expected him to be shocked and ask me what I was doing up, but he instead surprised me. He said something along the lines of, "Oh, did the baby wake you up?" I was just downstairs eating some leftovers. Kisses me on the cheek. "Good night then," and tucks himself in and rolls over to sleep. I was dumbfounded at how quick he was to lie straight to my face. I guess when he came upstairs, I expected him to not be able to hold back from what he had been doing, or at least be worried about why I was awake, or the fact that I was awake. It made me so mad to see he was so prepared to lie to my face and pretend everything was fine when I had been concerned and upset for weeks, that I exploded. I marched around the bed and shoved the evidence in his face, yelling at him and asking what the hell he had been doing for all this time and why. I demanded answers. The next few hours went by in a blur of yelling and arguing. His argument basically was that I didn't, couldn't, and would never understand why he did it, so why should he even bother telling me? My issue was the fact that I was trying really hard to be understanding of his nightly trash can visits, but instead, I just got lied to by the one person in the world who is supposed to be honest to me. A lot more yelling, and I'm bawling at this stage, and ask between sobs if it's some sort of sexual arousal thing for him. And he surprises me once more by going completely silent and just looks down at his feet. I explode once more, asking him how on earth he can find this exciting in any way, to which he got angrier than I've ever seen him in my life, yelled at me, "See? This is exactly why I can't ever tell you," and walked out our front door and drove off. He's been staying at his brother's house since and hasn't been to see our son. Frankly, if he's getting off on this in any way, I don't want him here. I thought I'd give us a few days to cool down before calling him, but he called the next day and said we needed to talk about getting a divorce. We tried to both have a calm conversation. I said to him, "Please, let's try and sort something out. Counselling, anything." And all he said in reply was, "Can I see my son though?" I told him that, honestly, I didn't think it was a good idea at this time, considering the circumstances. He said, "Okay," and told me he'd be getting a lawyer, and I probably should too. So right now, we're doing it as civilly as we can through the legal system, but I doubt that he has anything against me, considering I have evidence of sorts. My mother has come to stay with me in the family home to help out with the baby, and I haven't had the courage to tell her what our divorce is over. I'm just too ashamed. All I've said is, it's bad, and I tried giving him the option to counselling which he rejected, and that's that. I don't know what will happen from here, but I thought at least you guys should know the essence of it. Thanks again for all the support and understanding. I hope you don't judge me for the way I approached it. I know I could have done better, but what's done is done, and I need to just put my heartbreak aside and try moving forward for the sake of my son, because he is, and always will be, the priority in my life. Smoking fetishes are a thing for some people. Some just enjoy the smell or the sensation of smoking. But the users in this subreddit take this kink to a much darker level. As of the creation of this video, the subreddit has just under 7,000 members, each of them drawn to the negative effects of long-term smoking. Some of the posts themselves are in some ways fascinating. Some of them are now of legal age to smoke and are looking to begin their journey, and others started from a very young age, now viewing their smoking habits as milestones. But it gets quite darker. Some posts discuss their health and how it's slowly deteriorating. Do I look worried about my health? Hell no. I know what these cigarettes are doing to me and I don't care. I love the buzz. I love the cough. I love the craving. I love the ache in my lungs. I love not giving a damn. Others discuss getting others addicted to nicotine. Not content to simply ruin my own lungs, I've gotten a couple of my girlfriends addicted too. But even after all of this, it goes one step darker. Does anyone else think pregnant women smoking is the hottest? My pregnant aunt smokes quite a lot and doesn't care about the baby being affected by it or possibly miscarrying. She's 6 months in, and I'm finding it so damn sexy. The most popular posts in the subreddit are posts just like these, all focused on the after effects on both the woman and the child. Protecting their baby from tobacco smoke is one of the best possible things they could do to give their child a healthy start in life. But they simply don't care. It's all just about the rush for the people within this subreddit. The suffering and deterioration of one's health is just part of the enjoyment, even if it means inflicting the same health risks and suffering on others too. In the Ask Reddit subreddit, one user asked, "What is the scariest situation you've been in and thought, I'm not getting out of this alive?" One comment from a now deleted account tells the story about how he and one other person met Bickford, an encounter they'd never forget. I've posted this before, but it's by far the scariest thing that has ever happened to me. This post is very long, but I couldn't tell the whole story very well without it being this long. When I was a missionary in Brazil, my companion and I were approached by a seemingly homeless man who greeted us in almost perfect English. Turns out he was an American who'd been living in Brazil for about 30 years. His name was Bickford. He had to have been in his late 50s to 60s. It was hard to tell because of his big beard and very unkempt appearance. He feigns interest in what we were peddling and asks for a copy of the Book of Mormon, but is clearly more excited to be speaking English with two Americans. We meet up with him a few times to discuss religion, but he would always meet us at the side of the road or some other public but still secluded place. We had to give weekly reports to the ecclesiastical leader for the local unit about who we were meeting and teaching. After meeting Bickford a few times, we bring him up in our weekly meeting. The bishop and the other leaders instantly know who we're talking about and caution us to stay away from this guy. Apparently, he's a bit unstable and once or twice a year will start bothering the missionaries. My companion and I can't believe that the bishop is referring to the same person, and we continue meeting with him. I don't know how to adequately describe the creepiness of this guy. Between his dishevelled appearance, flat out lying to us, and other small signs, he had a certain sinister vibe. But with nothing concrete to put our finger on, we continued to speak to him. Occasionally, he would run into us, right outside of the house we lived in. One night, after talking about his house in the jungle and how nice and wonderful it was out there, he agrees to have us meet him at the side of the road in front of his house, so he can guide us down the path to his house. The time arrives, and we are waiting patiently by the side of the road, but Bickford is very late. Just as we are about to leave, he arrives and takes us down the path into the jungle. When we finally arrived at his house, my companion and I played it cool, but we couldn't believe what we were seeing. He had led us to a small clearing, where there was a wooden cabin that had half collapsed on itself. He said welcome home, and led us inside. There was no electricity, no running water, no utilities whatsoever. We walked in the front door frame, no door, and saw that all furniture in the house had been destroyed. Literally, someone had concentrated a large amount of effort and time to achieve this level of destruction. Chairs were unrecognizable, and there was trash everywhere. He begins showing us the main room inside the front door. That's when I noticed them. Notes. In chalk. On every square inch of the wooden walls, up the walls, on the ceiling, in a tiny frenzied scrawl. When I trained my light on the notes and started to read them, it got real. Most of the notes were variations on, "Jesus will forgive me, but I have to stop." I did it again. These with a month and date written next to them, and the pièce de résistance, the names of several children, with their ages, and graphic, inappropriate details about them. We tried so hard to not mention the notes. We tried so hard to ask him small talk questions about the rotting food on the stove, or the 100 or so rats he kept in his basement. Anything but mentioning the notes. I can't speak for my companion, but I was freaking the hell out. From glances at each other, I could see that he was at DEFCON 1 as well, and we decided to get the hell out of there. We made some excuse as it was getting late, that we needed to get home, and he reluctantly offered to show us the way back, on the condition that we would come visit again. As we get out of the house, he suddenly remembers that he knows a shortcut and tells us to follow him. The direction he's trying to lead us is clearly not the way back to the road. it only led deeper into the jungle. We politely decline, and luckily, we were able to follow the trail that we had originally made through the underbrush. When we got back onto the road and realized we were safe, we looked at each other as if to say, did that really happen? Once we started talking about what we just saw, I was so terrified that I physically could not speak. Nothing like that had ever happened to me, nor since. I absolutely could not make a sound, I was so scared. My companion called our leaders, who called their leaders, and we ended up moving about a week later, but not before making an entry in our area book, the book that stays in the area, listing who had been talked to and who to contact in the area, warning all other missionaries to stay away from this guy. I realize the entire ordeal sounds completely cliché. Everything about Bickford did. That's why, after our second conversation with him, I started recording every time we would meet with my digital camera. I would set it on audio record mode and stick it in my pocket. The audio is terrible quality, and at one point, I even slip and fall into the entrance to his rat dungeon. But it is entirely 100% real. The audio recording itself is over an hour long. I've briefly gone through the recording, capturing some of the most interesting parts. Let's take a listen.
Do you write yourself notes on the...
Sometimes I do.
That's neat.
I have electronic schedule. How do you call it? Electronic agent. But now it's in some form there. I got it. I wrote on every wall. You know, when I call like this, they come fast.
Oh, here they are, the rats.
Yes. 125. Where?
Here, I'll trade back through the places.
No, let's see here. Change. Let me call them so you can see they come.
Okay.
Maybe they don't come because they're fed up.
Yeah? Oh, I can see them now. Okay. Go ahead and call them. You can see yourself. I can see. I can see. Save this in case there's any. Huh?
See, they think it's food.
Yeah.
You can catch him and say hello. This is a female.
Do you not put the collars on all of them, or?
No, not in the old ones.
Hmm.
These are the first. These I even leave the tails on.
Normally you clip them off.
Yes.
How come?
I have a little scissor, a pair of scissors.
Interesting.
But I do it very carefully, not to hurt it.
Of course, yeah. Well, we better get back to our house at night here.
Okay.
But it was nice to come out here to see where you live and everything.
Let me return that little rat to his house.
All right.
Well, can you lead us back out?
Yes, of course. But there's a shorter way to out.
No, we can go out the same way that we came in.
Same way is fine.
Think so?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Simple pause.
Well, I think please come this way. All this way to the gate is so wet. You're going to...
It's okay, no. I'd actually prefer to go that way, because that way wasn't so bad.
Oh. I know. Well, so there's a short... You know, remember that street I told you?
Mm-hmm.
The street is closer here from this way.
Let's go.
We can pass by the same place we were 2 minutes ago. But
We can go back just the same way. That way we can learn it better for the next
Yeah,
time.
that way we can learn it better for the next time.
all right.
He concluded his post by writing, "After I posted this on Reddit, I went and made a report to both the local police in the area, along with the Brazilian Federal Police. If Rota, state-level SWAT team, without all those pesky try not to shoot people rules, has any say in the matter, Bickford's rats have probably already disposed of his body." Sometimes, a subreddit can be quite the opposite of disturbing. They can be communities for people to come together and form a safe space for one another. That's what Ask Gay Bros is, where gay men come together for various topics, advice, and everything in between. Here, we meet Clueless Jack, a 15-year-old who made the brave decision of coming out to his parents, but it unfortunately didn't go so well. "I made the biggest mistake of my life by coming out to my parents, and got kicked out of the house. Clueless now. I'm 15, and I honestly don't know why I even told my parents I'm gay, even though I live in one of the most homophobic countries in the world. I was literally kicked out the house, and my family threatened to attack me if I ever go back home. Now, I'm at a friend's place. I told him and his family that my parents are on vacation and I'd have to crash at their place for a few days. I can't stay at my friend's place forever. I honestly don't know what to do. I just want this all to end. My country has no resources for LGBTQ+ folks. I'm still in high school, underage to work, so I am not allowed to work anywhere. I honestly have no clue what to do. No friends I can talk to about this. I can't go to my relatives either, because my parents must have told them about me being gay. I can't believe one mistake has caused this. I am so done." Through the comments, we learn that Clueless Jack is from Saudi Arabia, where people within the LGBT community face repression and discrimination. The government of Saudi Arabia provide no legal protection for LGBT rights, with both male and female same-sex activity being illegal within the country. One selfless user, Viator in Love with Russ, immediately came to Jack's support, providing him with some options. "I'm an American who used to live in Saudi Arabia and was closeted while I lived there. I can connect you with a few people who might be able to help get you out of KSA. But of course, a large part of that would depend upon your nationality and getting a passport, etc. I know you're hurt and upset and in shock. You have been betrayed by the people who should love and accept you. I know you feel like ending it all. Those feelings are natural, but they're not permanent. If you decide you're ready to leave KSA, I would gladly sponsor you, and you may live with me here in the US. I'd expect you to finish your schooling, and I would be happy to mentor you for college, or whatever you want to do as a career. Feel free to PM me. You have options. There are many here that will support you with a few dollars, friendship, and good counsel. Hang in there." Thankfully, Clueless Jack did reach out to this user. His real name was Roshan, and the two would begin exchanging emails over the course of a couple days, with Roshan explaining his situation and informing his uncle of him being gay. My uncle is my mum's brother, and yes, I did tell him about me being gay because I didn't see how telling him could harm me, given he lives in a different country. Thankfully, he's been very understanding and helpful. He's advised me to stop using and delete all social media profiles because my parents are my friends on Facebook and Instagram. At this point in time, my Facebook and everything, in fact, is disabled. I'll connect with you when I re-enable it. I've never been outside of the Middle East, so I might struggle a bit in the West if I do manage to get there. That's, again, kinda concerning, but I guess I should worry about that later. This is me. With this, he attached a photo of himself. The two would continue to exchange emails. A couple of weeks would go by when Roshan would send the user an update. Hey, how have you been? Thanks for writing in. I'm still at my friend's place. My uncle is going to my house to collect my passport from my mum. After that, we'll be leaving for Dubai. I'll most probably be in Dubai by the time I email you next. And we can connect on Skype or FaceTime then. Everything seemed like it was going perfect for Roshan, but this glimmer of hope would only last for so long. The original Redditor who reached out to Roshan posted an update on Roshan's current situation. For those following Clueless Jack, I just received the following message from his uncle 15 minutes ago. Dear Mr. Viata in love with Russ. I'm Roshan's uncle, Mustafir. It is with a heavy heart I must inform you that Roshan decided to take his own life in February. His father, my sister's husband, threatened to do it himself if he was ever found at home. Sadly, we couldn't get him out of Riyadh in time, and he was found lifeless in his friend's house. I managed to get into Roshan's email account via his phone, and found this email conversation and thought it's important that you know. I'd like to thank you for your support and care. You were the only person who Roshan opened up to and spoke freely. Inshallah, he too is looking down on you and thanking you. His funeral was held in Dubai, as well as Riyadh, his hometown. But I'd like to believe he will always be around me here in Dubai. Thank you, Mustafir. It's not clear why Roshan never made that trip to Dubai. Perhaps his parents refused to give him his passport, or perhaps he was even coerced into staying under false promises. Either way, it's an incredibly heartbreaking story on how one's beliefs can make the difference between life and death for your own child. The gang-stalking subreddit has gained a bit of a reputation throughout the years. The subreddit focuses upon presenting information about predatory gang-stalking, which is the idea that those affected believe they're being followed, or stalked, by a large number of people. The subreddit itself has sort of been raided by a few people who either just don't believe in any of it at all, or who just post memes and call the members of the subreddit crazy. But the reality of those within the subreddit goes much darker. Some of the posts within this subreddit are just downright creepy, with some users going to extreme levels in believing they truly are being stalked and harassed by a group of people. The unfortunate reality for these people, though, is that most, if not all of them, are just simply experiencing some form of psychotic delusion. But what makes it worse is that this subreddit essentially reinforces this behaviour, enabling one another to believing things that aren't even there. I wanted to read some of the posts created by some users, but for the sake of their privacy, I won't be sharing their usernames. I don't exactly know where to post this, or where to begin. Everything that I've been doing lately has gone to hell, my entire life. I feel as though people are out here spreading false information about me. Not just friends and family, but random people I don't even know. Every aspect of my life has been ruined and infiltrated. I don't know who to speak to about any of this. I can't go to the police because I'm sure they are in on it, and I don't want to be looked as crazy. I try to not pay any mind to it all, but when you make it hard for someone to get a job, make money, take care of their family, it becomes very hard to ignore it all. I'm a very peaceful person, and I stay to myself. I don't bother anyone, and I don't have many friends, yet I made so many enemies. It's gotten to the point that these people are trying to make every little thing I do, or want to do, as bothersome as possible. I feel as though this is to get me to overreact to the wrong people and do something crazy. They want me dead, in jail, or look crazy. Not to mention, all forms of electronics have been hacked, Everyone looks at me with a distasteful look, as if they heard something about me, but are too afraid to approach me about the issue. You think it's a joke and game until it's your life on the line. People don't even realise the type of people that are out here amongst us. To the guy that asked if the posts are real, it would be very coincidental that thousands of people are experiencing the same dilemma. Some aren't as strong as others and end it all, or they snap and commit homicides. Another user claims there's people in his apartment, but he just can't see them. I'm assuming I had some non-consensual surgery done on my eyes and they don a cloak. Things drop out of mid-air and strands of hair fall right in front of me. It's amazing, but I'm scared because now that I'm aware, I'm assuming they want to kill me. I feel injections in my feet and limbs and sometimes I'm asphyxiated. I fled my apartment and now I'm on the streets. Multitudes of people hurl death threats as I walk by. People I've never met calling me negative things as I walk by, saying they already selected a victim to justify my homicide. I'm terrified, and sometimes I can barely breathe. My heart is giving out, and they laugh and ridicule as I walk by. I don't want to be murdered, but I don't know where to go for safety anymore. I can barely walk from the torture. Someone please help me. It's quite heartbreaking to go through the subreddit and look through these posts. In between memes and troll posts, I really do believe there are some users in the subreddit who are in desperate need of help, with there being no one to help them. And maybe that's what this subreddit is for them, a sort of safe space, where they believe they can't be harassed and can finally be free from their own thoughts. Imagine waking up one day to discover that everything you believed about yourself was a lie. This is the basis of our next post, in which one user within the Ask Reddit subreddit asked, "Throwaway time. What's your secret that could literally ruin your life if it came out?" In this thread, a throwaway account by the name of ABCH shares his incredibly disturbing story of how he was raised to be something he's not. Some background info. I'm a guy in my late 20s who was taken into care aged 7. Everyone around me already knows that I was brought up by foster families because I had a crap early childhood. I deliberately keep it vague and say stuff like, I'd rather not go into it, so that people will just assume I was abused in some way and they'll stop asking about it. The truth is that for the first 7 years of my life, I was brought up as a girl by my psycho birth mother who really wanted a daughter and didn't let the snag of giving birth to a boy stop her from trying to raise one. She was a pretty successful professional in a legal field, not entirely sure what, and had me via an anonymous sperm donor from a fertility clinic. She found out I was a boy at a late ultrasound and then moved across the country. She gave birth to me at home and continued to move about until I was 5 or so. It was just the two of us all my life. We had contact with other people, of course, but they rarely got very close. I had lots of friends, but was always supervised. I found out way after that my mother's strong, puritanical Christianity was a lie. She used to explain why she was so strict about me being private and never letting anyone see me get changed or anything. I just accepted all of this as fact, having never been told anything different. I was sent to a religious school for girls and had a really great childhood. I was a bit of a tomboy and played with Lego and toy animals rather than dolls and stuff, but that's not unusual and no one ever questioned I was a girl, even me. I knew about men and women, but had never really seen much of naked people. My mother never ever spoke to me about it, but I kinda had the impression that when I grew up and got boobs and stuff, my dick would kinda fall off or something and I would be a woman, and other kids would keep their dicks and they'd be men. I don't know. To be honest, I never really thought about it. Anyway, I carried on with my happy girlhood and had a bunch of friends and everything was great until I was 7 and a teacher accidentally spilled a cup of hot coffee over me at school. The liquid soaked through my clothes and was scalding me so the staff immediately stripped me out of my dress and underwear to get the hot coffee away from my skin. And then they found out. The cops were called, and I got taken to speak with who I guess would be social services. They asked me a bunch of questions about life at home and stuff. Meanwhile, my mother was taken in for questioning too. She refused to acknowledge me as male and insisted I was her daughter, because she was, delusional and stuff. I wasn't allowed to go back home, but got put with a foster family and went through loads of therapy and stuff. The worst part was that literally overnight I lost everything. My mother, my home, all my toys, all my clothes. I moved school, so lost all my friends. They cut all my hair off and told me I wasn't a girl anymore. It was really, really traumatic. The first foster home wasn't that great. They had 3 boys already, and going from a sheltered, religious, only child upbringing to a rough-and-tumble, testosterone-filled environment was really difficult. They tried to force me to be masculine, and I was just too confused about what they wanted. Anything girly was reprimanded, and I felt so lost and alone because nothing I did was right. I tried to end it all when I was 11, and again at 13, because I didn't feel I fitted in anywhere. After the second attempt, they moved me to a different foster family who were awesome. I consider them to be my parents. They actually stood up for me. The first thing was that they let me grow my hair. When I got taken into care, they buzzed my hair short, and I hated it. They always had to hold me down and do it forcibly while I was crying and fighting. My new parents flatly refused to do it and said that loads of boys had long hair. They also let me quit karate and football and take up swimming and jazz dance. Since I'd been in care, no one had ever stood up for my right to choose what activities to do or how to dress before. It was amazing. In the end, I came out of it with a pretty healthy gender identity. I'm a guy, but not the most butch guy ever, but I'm fine with that. I went through school and got my degree and have a pretty good job and an amazing, supportive wife. Everything looks great, but I can never speak about my early childhood and how I grew up as a little girl. Our next post comes from the Entitled Parents subreddit. Here, a user by the name of Lil Froggies tells a story that was told by her friend on one of the worst entitled parents I think I've ever seen. So not my story, but my friend's. She's a midwife at a very busy hospital and followed this entitled mother with her pregnancy with a lot of difficulty because she wouldn't show up at appointments or show up and demand being seen to when she wasn't scheduled. Entitled the entire pregnancy pretty much. Anyways, come the end of her term, she doesn't go into labour. No big deal at first. She would just have to come in every few days for my friend to check on the baby and see if she'd need to get induced. Except she straight up refuses to get induced. My friend advises her that for now she doesn't have to be, but later, if she doesn't go into labour, she'd be risking her life and the baby's, and sets up an appointment for a few days away. A few days later, she's a no-show, so my friend calls. Her patient refuses to go in because she doesn't want to be induced, and that her and God know best, it'll come naturally. My friend calls every few days to try to convince the lady to come in, and finally gets the husband on the phone, explains the risks to him. He convinces the lady to come in for a checkup. Still no signs of labour, and at this point she's quite a bit overdue. My friend explains once again that the entitled mother has to get induced, otherwise she risks the baby's and her own life. But the entitled mother says the same thing. God and her know best. My friend tells her her baby will die if she leaves the hospital, but she demands to be discharged. The hospital cannot keep her against her will, since neither her or the baby aren't in immediate danger, meaning she could still maybe wait a day or two if monitored to be induced, so my friend has to let her go. Fast forward a few weeks later, the entitled mother is now way past being 3 weeks overdue 2 weeks overdue is usually the very limit for most hospitals, and comes back complaining of stomach pain. My friend orders an immediate induction and checks with a quick echo to confirm her suspicions. The baby passed away in the womb because she refused being induced and her placenta rot. My friend told me it was awful in the delivery room, not only because of what they were delivering, but also because of the smell of the placenta and the baby. The stomach pains the mother was complaining about was the infection from the rot, and she didn't even blame herself. She just shrugged it off as God's will and it wasn't meant to be. She made a full recovery and was let go from the hospital, totally plans on trying for a child again. This next post comes from the Relationship Advice subreddit, where the user smallbean197 confesses something disturbing. I found out my partner has been putting slugs in my food. I don't know how to forgive him. I'm a 22-year-old female and have been with my partner, 24, for 4 years now. I've never known him to do anything like this, but I noticed he started acting a little strange around a month, maybe a month and a half ago. He started putting fruit on the floor in the garden. I thought it was a bit weird, but he said he was feeding the mice family that have nested in our shed. I thought it was sweet and helped him do so. Anyways, he started being really nice to me around 2 weeks ago and was making me food, baking me cakes and stuff, which he never usually cooks ever, so I was so happy he found a hobby. I did notice sometimes I felt sick and dizzy after eating and I just put it down to lack of sleep or hormones. Anyways, a friend of my partner's came into my work today, I work in a cafe, and said he needed to speak to me when I was free. He told me that my partner has been collecting slugs from the garden on fruit he has been putting out there and putting them in my food, blending them up. He even sent this friend of his pictures of a bag of slugs he had collected and the picture of blended slugs. I feel really sick to my stomach. I don't understand why he would do this. This is so out of character of him. I asked him why he was doing it, and he accused me of snooping through his messages, which I would never do, and got so angry at me for not being able to take a joke. I feel disgusting. I love him to pieces, but I just don't understand his way of thinking just now. Am I overreacting? I don't know what to do. I feel lost. Of course, the comments were only just sympathetic. People die from eating slugs. He is deliberately poisoning you. Honestly, you need to talk to the cops. I would very seriously consider pressing charges. At the absolute very least, you need to never be alone with this guy again. What the actual hell? The OP was active in the comments, writing, "Everyone, I've just found a jar under the sink with about 4 slugs in. I didn't touch it with my hands for DNA evidence if it gets taken that far. I've taken a photo and posted on my profile. I didn't know how to post here." And sure enough, she did post an image of the slugs in the jar. She would later post an update on her situation in a separate post. I went to urgent care last night in the early hours of morning and waited, and was finally seen around 6 a.m.-ish. I had some tests, and I have a high level of metaldehyde in my blood. I was kept in for monitoring, and I have some ulcers in my stomach. I was aware of this anyways, as I was hospitalized about 2 months ago for a burst ulcer. Originally thought it was stress, but they now said it could be because of the poisoning. I could have an infection of some kind as my temperature is high, but they haven't found anything that could be causing that yet. They've checked my heart, and it's fine. I'm due to have heart surgery this year though, but they're delaying it due to ulcers and infections, and the fact I keep getting sick, which is okay. I have an appointment to see my cardiologist on the 20th of April. I contacted the police and wrote a statement and was asked some questions. My ex refused to say anything to the police or to me. However, he did say he would speak to his friend and only him. He then spoke to me. I wasn't alone. I was with a friend and his friend too. He confessed to doing random experiments on me and tests starting a few months after we moved in together. It started with spitting on my toast, and then the week later he replaced my propranolol, beta blockers, with salt, emptied capsules. I want to add, he was my medication holder as I have a history of bad mental health, so he handled my meds and gave them to me, and that's when he thought it would be funny. He also admitted to these things, swapping my Linda McCartney vegetarian sausages with real meat. I have IBS and struggled to digest meat, so became a vegetarian. He also replaced my corn nuggets with his real ones. One of my pet giant African land snails went missing in summer, and I assumed it escaped as I left the lid open on their box. But he said it had died, so he scraped it out and put it in my curry. I vaguely remember the day he did this, as he laughed whenever I went to eat the curry, and I got really paranoid, so I put the curry in the kitchen and stormed off. He then brought it upstairs and told me to taste. I did, and I realised he added loads of chili, and he said he was laughing because he put chili powder in and too much came out. Now, I think he must have put the chili in to cover the fact he put my snail in there. He also said he rubbed my toothbrush on the toilet, but then washed it as he thought that was too far. I feel like this is all a dream. It just seems too dramatic to feel real. I'm unsure what's happening on the legal front. He says he didn't know why he did this, and that he does love me truly, and that he felt compelled to do it. Which I understand, as I suffer from OCD and get compulsions and impulsions, and that he really loves taking care of me, and he feels it's his purpose, and he didn't mean to cause serious harm. He promises he never did any of this to our animals. I think he could just be stressed, as I have mental health issues that could have caused something in him to break from too much stress. I'm really sad, and sorry for those who I caused concern. Why are you still making excuses for him? One comment wrote. It doesn't matter what he says he was thinking or why he did it. It only matters that he does. Please distance yourself from him. A restraining order seems necessary. He's extremely dangerous to you and the world. She would later go on to post another update, this time in the advice subreddit, writing, I'm struggling to eat. Fear of food, no appetite. I recently left a weird relationship where my partner was contaminating my food, etc. Anyways, ever since I've struggled to eat. I moved into a ground floor flat, and sometimes I'll find slugs around the house. I'm terrified of them. I keep throwing food away because I don't know what the slugs have gone on. I'm scared of getting sick. I can't cope or breathe right now. I've tried everything to stop slugs getting in, copper tape, salt, non-toxic pellets, but they still somehow find their way into my flat. I feel like nature is tormenting me. Any advice, please? I've tried speaking to my doctor, but they won't really listen. And the doctor I see said it was a good thing as I was overweight anyways. I was just discharged from the mental health team I was currently on. It's clear that the ex's actions have taken a negative toll on the OP, but she thankfully did write a final update post. Hello everyone, sorry for those who I didn't get to message back. My messages have been so full. I am alive, but have been sick with coronavirus. Thank you to those who reached out to me. You all made me feel less alone. Hope everyone is well. Based on her account history, she seems alive and well. There's no information to suggest any legal action was taken against her ex, but I'm glad she's been able to move on from such a traumatic experience. This final post comes from the Relationship Advice subreddit. The user, ThrowAQSummerstorm, explains her story of the gift she gave to her father, which broke her entire family apart. This is gonna be very long, sorry about that. My parents were high school sweethearts. They started dating when they were both 16. They dated for 4 years, and then my mum got pregnant with my oldest sister. Then my dad did the right thing. He dropped out of college. He was on the path to medical school. It was his dream to become a doctor. Married my mum and started working at a desk job at my grandpa's company. My parents later had 3 other kids, my older sisters, and me. My childhood was pretty normal. Dad worked, Mum stayed at home taking care of me and my sisters. Dad was always very present in our lives. Me and my sisters were always Daddy's girls. We were very attached to him. I was particularly close to him. We had a really deep bond. When I was 13, I was diagnosed with leukemia, and he never left my side. He held my hand during chemo sessions during the whole time. He consoled me when I had my first heartbreak and assured me that everything would be all right. He taught me how to drive. He walked me down the aisle 3 years ago when I married my husband and told me that was one of the happiest days of his life. I was always his favourite as well. My parents were happy. I never saw them fighting or anything like that. My dad took my mum on date nights at least twice a week. He spoiled her a lot, and they seem really in love. My parents were the perfect couple. Everyone saw them as something flawless, an example of true love. My mum was my dad's only one, and dad was mum's only one. It was something that he was very proud of. It was really special for him. I felt really bad when I lost my virginity to my ex-boyfriend and realised that I couldn't ever have the same thing as my parents. My dad's mum died during birth, and Grandpa raised him as a single parent. He never remarried or dated anyone after her death as far as I know. Grandpa refused to talk about Grandma. It was very painful for him. He never met anyone from Grandma's side of the family, and Grandpa didn't talk much about her. In June, I bought a 23andMe kit for me and Dad. I thought that would be cool to see if he had any relatives on Grandma's side, and we did the tests together. We did the tests. I found out that I had 2 half-brothers, and that we shared the same father. We were honestly confused. Dad and I didn't understand that. We thought that this was a mistake. When we told Mum about this, she froze. She started crying. We pressured her a bit more, and that's when she confessed about her 11-year-old affair with one of my dad's friends. He was our neighbour at a certain point of our lives, and he was in the same class as Dad and Mum. I remember seeing him around when I was a kid. He was a close friend of the family. Dad was in denial. He thought that it was a mistake. Me and my sisters ended up doing the test at a hospital. 3 days later, the results arrived. No one matched with Dad. He wasn't our father. For the first time in 30 years of my life, I saw my dad cry. Not a normal cry, sobbing, like a kid. We tried to talk to him. He got up, grabbed his keys and left. We tried to call like 100 times and he didn't answer. My mum was having a panic attack, so my oldest sister took her to the hospital. We didn't hear from Dad for 3 whole days. We searched for him everywhere. Eventually, my grandpa found him at the family fishing cabin. He had hanged himself. He didn't leave any notes or anything like that. In 9 days, I discovered that my mum had an 11-year affair, that my dad wasn't my biological father, and that he took his own life. It broke me. His funeral was another mess. My dad's side of the family got into a fight with my mum's side of the family. My grandpa and uncles ended up kicking my mum out of the funeral. It was a disaster, the first time I saw my grandpa crying as well. It was something I wish I hadn't seen. He entered a really deep depression after that. He barely speaks anymore. After the funeral, neither I or my sisters could look at Mum anymore. We just couldn't. I can't look my sisters in the eye as well, and I blame myself every day for suggesting that effing stupid test. Thanksgiving this year was the first time we didn't celebrate as a family in 33 effing years. I can't look at my mother anymore. She spends her days staring at a wall. Her side of the family is pressuring me and my sisters to re-establish contact, but I just can't. My sisters are also not speaking to her since the funeral. I found out that I'm pregnant last week. My husband and I have been trying for the last 2 years, and I'm not even happy. I feel hopeless. I feel broken. Sometimes I start to think about Dad, and my heart feels like it's going to explode. I just miss him so much. Has anyone been in a similar situation? How do I survive this effing guilt? How the hell do I move past this?
Hey, what's up guys, and welcome back to another Reddit Stories video, and today we will be covering a very exciting topic, terrifying true Reddit stories. And all these stories are true and verified, and some of these are very disturbing. So I'm excited to get into this one because true stories are always one of my favorites just because they are, true and just super interesting, and they're all super scary, unsettling, and some are kind of weird, but I'm sure you'll enjoy them. And these videos are great to listen to if you are studying, sleeping, relaxing, or just want to watch a video. So this video will fit perfectly for whatever you're trying to do. And also, before we get into the video, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. It's your channel's goal to be at 500,000 subscribers, so please subscribe to the channel. And all right, without further ado, let's get into some terrifying true Reddit stories. I came across an incredibly creepy family a while back. Okay, I never really post anything on Reddit, mostly just reading, so please excuse me if I do or say anything that isn't common courtesy here. In around 2018 to 2019, I, 25 female at the time, was 18 or 19 and was living in Nebraska, where I grew up. I lived in the largest city in Nebraska, but it was still essentially surrounded by corn and wheat fields. The city was expanding, so rich folks started building huge houses with giant properties on the edge of town as things proceeded to grow. All of that being said, I had a good friend whose parents' house was one of those big ones, right on the blurring line between the fields and the city. My friends and I were constantly hanging out at his place because it was fun. They had tons of property to ride 4x4s on, a hot tub, a huge living room for us to watch sports and have reality TV binge sessions, etc. Plus, his parents were super cool. We could drink out there as long as we stayed at the house. It was tons of fun, even though I was and am quite scared of the dark, so I would just not go outside after a certain time because there was little lighting and the nearest neighbor was about a mile away. I always felt a weird energy driving to and from his place if it was late at night, but never had anything happened until one night. The drive out there was a long, winding, two-way road that had thick trees on both sides, and you passed one of the city's largest cemeteries on the way. Barely any lighting, of course, besides the street lamps every once in a while, and very little traffic. It's all inherently a bit creepy, and I'll admit to having sped through the section of road many times to get through it as quickly as possible. This specific night was perfect spring weather, so I was driving with my windows down listening to music, and it was around 10 p.m. I was coming around one of the curves in the road when I had to essentially slam my brakes on. Right in front of me, in the middle of the road, maybe 50 yards away, was what looked like a family. Again, picture a completely pitch black road with thick forest on both sides and only my headlights to show what's in front of me. This was a family of 3, 4, a tall, slim woman, an average height / weight man, a child, short hair but couldn't tell the gender based on the clothing and couldn't see their face, maybe around 8 years old, and the mother was pushing a fucking stroller. Their clothes looked normal, not tattered but not nice. They also were not carrying any kind of light source, meaning before I arrived behind them in my car, they'd been walking in the pitch black. They're all facing away from me, walking completely silent in the middle of the street the same direction I was heading. I had turned my music down to hear if they were speaking, had music playing, etc. They didn't. The hairs on my arms immediately stood up. I came to a stop in the road behind them, obviously, and just sat there for a moment to let them move. They seemed to be completely unaffected by me and didn't even turn their heads slightly, nor did they attempt to move out of my way. I literally thought I was going insane or that I was dreaming. It was so surreal. Before I really had time to fully process and register what I was seeing and how truly strange it was, they all, at the same time, stopped walking and very slowly turned to face my car. This scared the absolute shit out of me. I honestly didn't even give myself enough time to look at their faces as they turned. I immediately threw my car in reverse and sent it backwards for probably a full 20 seconds before flipping a U-turn, nearly running myself off the road and booking it the other direction. The only thing I remember noticing is that the stroller looked to be completely empty. This was the part that sticks in my mind the most. I've never felt terror like that in my life. I checked my rearview mirror probably 1,000 times before getting to a main road and never saw a glimpse of them. In fact, I never saw a glimpse of them ever again. I tried asking my friend and his family about it, only to essentially feel like I was insane because of the way they looked at me. Every time I tell this story, I get one of 3 reactions. They immediately think I'm fucking cuckoo, think I'm lying, or have had something sort of similar happen to them. I really don't care if no one believes me, honestly. It was, and still is, the creepiest thing to ever happen to me. I think about it all the time. It was either some weird ass family trying to scare the shit out of someone, a distraction for an attempted robbery / assault / etc., or it was something more sinister. I'm going to tell myself for probably the rest of my life that it was the first option. You dropped your wallet. It's 11:15 at night, and my wallet is in my purse. A little backstory. When I was 19, I lived with my mom in a ranch-style house on a road that backed up to a large field. On the other side was the main highway. About half a mile down from me was a loony farmer, and about a mile on the other side of me was pretty much a crack house. I guess someone used to live there, but it was run down. I'll say that crackheads were pretty quiet. Other than those 2 houses, we were isolated. At the time, I was working full-time and going to school full-time. One of my classes ended at 10:30 p.m. I often wouldn't get home that day of the week until about 11:15ish. I was driving home one night and I noticed some guy walking down the road. He had a yellow shirt and track pants. I remember his outfit because it was stupid. It wasn't weird to see people walking down my road because of the whole crack house thing, but I instinctively looked over at him when I drove past. He turned and smiled and waved, which freaked me the fuck out. So I sped the half-mile home and pulled into the driveway, weirded out. I made sure all the doors and windows were secure, and then sat on the couch to be a paranoid freak and wait to make sure the dude walked past my house. Except he didn't. And there was another guy with him, dressed in darker clothes. They actually walked up my driveway and started playing around with my car, testing the handles and stuff. In my hurry, I forgot to grab my phone from my car, so I was kind of worried that's what they were after, until the guy in yellow started approaching my door. I'm freaking out, so I go and wake my mom up. She's bleary, and I'm trying to explain the situation when we both hear the doorknob turn, very slowly. Good thing it was deadbolted. She got out of the bed, walked to the door, and then Yellow Shirt knocked. I perched up on the couch so I could get a good look at him and his friend, still in the driveway. The porch light was on because of the sensor. "Yeah?" my mom said. "You dropped your wallet." I told my mom that I had my wallet. It was in my purse. So she calmly told him that she had her wallet, and it was too late to be knocking on people's doors. I remember perfectly what he said next, even though this was about 6 years ago. "Okay. I'm not a bad guy, just so you know." We were all pretty still. No one moved. Not even the guy at the door. Not even when the porch light went off. Then he tried the handle again. My mom told me to call the cops so she could get the gun, and I told her I didn't have my phone. So she walked to the kitchen to grab hers from the charger. She handed me the phone and walked to the bathroom, stared out the window into the backyard. Then she went to her room to grab her Ruger. I was talking to the cops and explaining the situation, all while watching the 2 guys, explaining that there were 2 suspicious guys at her door when my mom came back out and said, "One in our backyard too," which explained why she had looked out the bathroom window. She glimpsed him from the kitchen and went to get a more discreet look. My mom walked back over to the door with her gun and loudly said, "If he tries to handle again, I'm just going to open the door and shoot him." Fuck knows why she said that instead of waiting for the cops to arrive, but the guys took off down the road. I told her, and she rushed to the bathroom, where the guy apparently in the backyard saw his friend running down the road and sprinted off too. They were going in the direction of the crack house. The cops searched our house and our yard and went to the drug house, where they found 5 dudes hanging around. One was the yellow shirt guy, and I'm assuming his friends were with him. They did get arrested and nothing weird like that ever happened again, but I was on edge for a while. I still make sure the doors are locked at all times every day, even though I live in a much nicer area now. Anyway, sorry it was a bit anticlimactic. The dudes got caught. Either way, weird guys who told me you found my wallet, let's not meet. I'm confident I would have become a missing persons case. I apologize in advance since I'm not a good writer, but I'll do my best to share my experience. To better paint the picture, here's a description of myself at the time of this incident, 3 years ago. 5'5", 26-year-old woman, medium length, bleach blonde hair, curvy, 175 pounds, wearing black high-waisted tights and a pink crop top. 3 years ago, I was walking home late at night from my friend's house. It was dark, and at the time I lived in a rough part of a large city. I've had many sketchy situations that I've always got myself out of, so I guess I felt sort of invincible, like nothing truly scary could happen to me. When I walk alone, I always stay very alert and aware of my surroundings for my own safety, just in case. About halfway home and roughly 10 minutes to my apartment, I noticed a van started tailing me. I was used to this since in my city it's very common for a young woman in a rough area to be pro-positioned for sex. It's embarrassing how desensitized to this I was. I did my usual and crossed the road so that I'd be walking beside the traffic heading in the other direction. I wasn't scared, just annoyed. The van then turned down a side street, then back onto the road I was on and pulled up to me. At this point, I still wasn't scared. Again, this has happened so many times that it never mattered if I was wearing something that showed more skin, or if I was wearing a winter coat zipped from just below my chin all the way down to my ankles. The area is notorious for that type of activity. I decided to be firm and told the person sternly, "I'm not interested." I noticed there were 2 men in the van. They looked almost identical and may have been twins or brothers. Both men had a very, very dark complexion, dark eyes, and short dark hair. The van didn't move. I was super annoyed and crossed the road again to get away. At this point, I figured this would be enough for them to stop following me. They didn't. They kept circling back every time I crossed the road. I've never had to put that much effort into getting a horny pervert to leave me alone, so this is when I started feeling unsafe. They zipped by me at the speed the traffic was flowing in, and I yelled for them to fuck off. I thought it finally worked. It had been 3 minutes and I hadn't seen the van, so I thought I was in the clear. Just in case, I pulled my phone out and was getting ready to call my sister that I lived with. Just then, the van pulled up to me very quickly, and before I could even blink, one of the men jumped out of the van, opened the back door, and approached me quickly in an aggressive manner as if he was about to scoop me up and throw me in the vehicle. The traffic in that area is very inconsistent. It was dead, and I imagine that is what they were waiting for. Just as the man was about to place his hands on me, I tilted my phone and said, "You're being filmed in my live video chat. I gave my friends your license plate number, and the police have been notified." I was so scared, but I didn't let that show. I stayed as calm as I could. The man paused like he was considering if I was just bluffing or telling the truth, so I tilted the phone more as if to give the fake audience a better look at him. He then jumped into the van and they sped off. I have never been the same since that night. I'm afraid of walking alone now, even in the daytime. Stay safe out there. 2 creeps in a van? Let's not ever meet. I hope karma finds you both soon. Almost gave a serial killer a car ride. So, a little background here. My father was in the Army for 21 years, retired, and moved to a very small town in Central Florida. He got bored after a couple of years, and even though we didn't need the money between his retirement and what my mom was making at a bookkeeper/tax prep, he wanted to go back to work. He started working at various gas stations. And it being a small town, the owners wouldn't care if I came there and helped him out with stocking the coolers or even running the register, as long as I didn't sell any beer or smokes. This all took place in the late 80s and early 90s. The actual story I'm going to tell took place in 1990, and I remember the date well, because it was shortly after my birthday and being 15 in Florida. I had just got my learner's permit. My dad would let me drive him to and from work, just to get some experience on the road, both at day and at night. I was sitting in my usual spot at a table that was set up along the windows, book in hand, feet propped up, and a Mountain Dew on the table along with some snacks. I would generally spend most of the evening that way, reading books, getting up to run the register/stock the cooler at different times. I remember glancing up because something caught my attention that was unusual, and I realized that a lady was walking up a parking lot from the direction of the interstate. The gas station was right on I-75. This in itself was really strange because where we were located, you didn't get many people walking, and definitely not walking from the direction of the interstate. I figured she had broken down somewhere. It was coming to use the phone to call for a tow truck or something. I was completely wrong. She came into the store, looked around for a few minutes, and I remember getting just a strange and creepy feeling about her. She walked up to the counter and started telling my dad a story about how she had gone stranded and needed a ride up to the next big town up north from us. Ocala was the town. This is important. My dad lets her know that he's working, and there's no way that he can take her. She turns and looks at me. While she is looking away from him, my dad catches my eye and subtly shakes his head no. I was confused for a second, but then she turns back to my dad and points at me, asking if I can take her. My dad responded back that I only had a learner's permit, and I wouldn't be able to drive her anywhere and then drive back. Normally, I would have done it, even though it was legal, because I'd done it a few times before already. I didn't argue with my dad, since this was completely out of character for him. He was normally chatty with the customers, but for whatever reason, he was almost curt and dismissive with her. Turns out, he had a bad vibe about her from the minute he had seen her walking up the drive. Well, she cusses him out for a minute, and he basically tells her to get out of the store. She slammed the door open. I thought the glass was going to break from how hard she slammed it, and then she stalks out of the store and down the driveway. I keep an eye on her and continue to watch as she makes her way back up the interstate and then starts up on the northbound on the ramp. Almost a year passes, and I'm in my bedroom, less than a week before my 16th birthday. I hear my dad yelling from the living room, "Son, get your ass in here and look at this." I quickly run to the living room and see my dad pointing at the TV. I look at the mugshot of the lady up on the screen, and I immediately remember the lady who had been in the store. Turns out, I almost gave a ride to Aileen Wuornos, who was later convicted of being a serial killer and then later put to death. Still have nightmares about what could have happened. That time I accidentally dated a sociopath. It has taken me many years to tell this story out of both fear and embarrassment. I share this today as more than simply therapy for myself, but as a warning to all people. Be careful who you meet on social media. In 2018, my ex-husband and I were at the end of a very tumultuous marriage. He and I had been polyamorous for about 3 years before I met this guy. His name was Jez. I met Jez on OkCupid. I was 28 and he was 42. We hit it off very quickly. After a few weeks of talking, I agreed to meet up with him at a restaurant close to my house. We sat and talked for a few hours before I invited him over to meet my husband. Things went very well, and they seemed to get along, so Jez and I started dating. This guy completely swept me off my feet. Jez was sweet and caring. He enthusiastically listened to every little thing on my mind, engaged, and validated me. Over and over again, he absolutely revered me for my strength and wisdom. He practically worshipped me for all that I was and all I was becoming. He showered me with gifts, flowers, and random good deeds just to make me feel safe, wanted, and cared for. I had never been in a relationship that quite felt like that. It was wonderful. It was as though we had been looking for each other for years. After the first few weeks, he had a meltdown over my polyamorous nature. He, quote, pulled the plug because he said he was already falling for me and couldn't handle sharing me. I stood my ground and accepted this boundary and that fact that I would have to let him go. I left that night sad but confident that I'd done the right thing for the both of us. The next week, he sent me flowers and a card to my workplace, begging for another chance and reassuring me that he would rather try than not and end up regretting it, even though it was scary. He wanted to take this journey with me. We continued dating and it was just as wonderful. Long nights we spent awake talking, sharing, laughing, lovemaking, and planning. We went places and did things that I'd always wanted to do. Then, in the deepest, most intimate moments, when we would just sit in silence, he would grip my hand to his face in solidarity and astonished, asking where I've been all this time. Our time together was effortless. We fit together like puzzle pieces. By August of 2018, my marriage had ended, by no fault of Jez's, and by October, my husband had moved out. I was on lease at a time and knew I couldn't afford the place on my own, so finding a roommate was essential. I had no support system to fall back on, nor did anyone else I know needed a place at the time, so Jez offered to move in. Even then, I was hesitant. We'd only been together for about 4 months, and I knew everything always changes when you move in with a partner. Despite my hesitation, I agreed. He was wonderful to me. How bad could it be? I was not prepared for the change that was to come. It was literally like night and day. Jez suddenly became a different person. He was extremely controlling, jealous, and lazy, nothing like the person I thought I had met. And the way he treated me progressively got worse and worse. Hanging out with friends became a burden, if not impossible, because he would blow up my phone, guilting me about leaving him alone or not involving him in some way. Yet when I tried to, it was also treated as a burden and inconvenience, as he would huff and puff his way through even the concept of leaving space for anyone but ourselves. In December of 2018, we attended my work Christmas party. I'd given him the option whether he wanted to go or not. It was really neither here nor there for me, especially because I had already learned that he really didn't do well if he felt pressured into social situations. I opened the invitation to him because it expressed to me over and over that it was important for him that he was involved in my social life. For the full month he knew about it, he insisted that he wasn't going. I took it as him being introverted and didn't push the issue. I let him know that I would make sure he felt welcome if he decided to go, but not to feel obligated. I was surprised when he changed his mind at the last minute and insisted on going, and even more stunned when we went and he actively acted as though he did not want to be there. Everyone there was incredibly welcoming and included him in the festivities and conversations. However, he still practically grumbled the entire night about the entire thing, mumbling insults and critiquing every little part of the party under his breath, as though being there was absolutely awful to have to endure. No one really seemed to notice the low whispering insults and gripes. At one point, after a couple of glasses of wine, my direct manager leaned into Jez and started praising him. She and I were very close, therefore she was intimately familiar with what I had gone through with my ex-husband. "I'm so happy she has you," she bleated through wine happy. "You've been absolutely transformative for her. It's so nice to see her finally happy and appreciated." Without missing a beat, Jez grimaced at the comment and quickly snapped back. "You don't fucking know me." I honestly didn't believe my ears. It was one of those moments where time stops and you just know you couldn't have heard that correctly. I sat brewing on it for a minute before another lighthearted interaction with Jez prompted him to suddenly snap at me through gritted teeth. "Stop it." This triggered me and I lost it. I pulled him outside and asked him what his problem was. I called out his behavior and told him if he was going to act that way, then he could just leave. That if he didn't want to be there, he should have stayed home. He ended up giving a sort of half-assed apology, and we went back inside and finished the party. I remember the drive home that night, staring out the dark window at nothing in particular, in worried silence. I might have messed up, was my only thought through the entire drive. This all started out slow, of course, like waving me away or invalidating my experiences and ideas due to my age, that I was dramatizing my experiences because I was young, etc. The man who, not 6 months prior, had validated me, my trauma and experiences to the ends of the earth. Now, every time I started a story or tried to share anything, even trying to plan out meals for the week, he would openly show annoyance as though I was violating his time and attention. Before I knew it, he was snapping at me over every little thing. If I asked how his day was or talked about my day, I would aggressively shut it down. "Why do you always ask me that? I don't want to talk shop at home. I really don't care about your work. It's work." Before I knew it, I couldn't even bring him a plate of breakfast without being snapped at. It was as though he was testing me. When Jez and I first started dating, he flat out refused to talk about most of his exes. He refused to name them or discuss any of the issues or lessons learned. They, quote, "didn't matter," he would claim. They weren't in his life for a reason. It was the same reasoning he also used in reference to my more recent exes. Talking about them, including my now ex-husband, may as well have become off limits. Anytime I brought up either of our exes, he would become incredibly agitated, belittling, and just overall very aggressive. I took this as both an age gap issue, as I have a tendency to dwell, as well as insecurity and a threat to the life he was trying to build. However, after he moved in, and this hot button topic had been established several times, he would bring up his exes and how they looked, telling me on more than one occasion. would have never dated me back in the day, and that I was lucky he lowered his standards. I didn't even really know what to say to this. I would laugh it off and shove it in my back pocket. Noted. And then started bringing up my looks and accusing me of catfishing him. I had stopped taking care of myself due to the isolation, had also put on some weight, so most of my clothes that I had once felt great in no longer fit. And since Jez had also been dishonest with me about his financial position, he was always needing extra money here and there, leaving me broke almost all of the time. A horrible tragedy happened that following summer. While Jez and I were together, I received notice that a good friend I went to art school with essed himself in the head while tripping on LSD. Our whole class was devastated. He was, without contest, the best photographer of our class and one of the most kind-hearted individuals I have ever had the pleasure of knowing. Also, as someone who is very familiar with LSD, I was rocked. Jez, however, was far from supportive. He pretty much immediately shrugged it off. That's life. I guess that's what he gets for fucking around with LSD. I was baffled at such an unsympathetic response, and even more later when Jez started to interrogate me about my relationship with this guy, asking when the last time it was that I had even talked to this friend. You don't even know this guy anymore. Who cares? I broke up with him the first time after he called me at work raging. I was busy, so I wasn't able to answer right away. But once I was finally able to answer, I was met with intense anger. It was storming, and one of my dogs was having an anxiety attack due to the storm and separation anxiety. This wasn't the first time, and he was well aware that she needed it in those moments. Why the fuck aren't you answering your calls? You answer when I call you. I don't care where you are. He went on for a few minutes, calling me a shitty girlfriend and laying into me over my sudden distance and lack of communication while I was at work. At this point, I was done, and I lost it. I tore into him over everything, especially causing problems for me at work. That being in my life is a privilege, and if he's gonna wake up every day acting like he hates me, then I don't know what on earth he's even doing with me. I told him that I expected him to get his things and leave. He was always threatening to go back to his old roommates where there was still room. I didn't want him there when I got home, and we could coordinate times for him to come and get the rest. He flat refused, suddenly victimizing himself, claiming he had nowhere to go. How dare you make me fall in love with you? How dare you make me meet your father and then dump me? My manager and her husband ended up following me home that evening because she was concerned for my safety and had offered to let me stay with her for a few days. I will never forget the scene I walked into. Like Theon Greyjoy begging for his life. My boss stood next to me, watching as this 42-year-old man crawled on his knees before me, begging for mercy and communication. At one point, wrapping his arms around my legs, crying into them. I can't believe this is happening. She's the love of my life, you know that? He cried to my boss. I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. This was the antithesis of the heartless person I've been spending my days with. I shook him off and went back to the house, gathering enough of my things to get them through the next few days, as well as any and all valuables I could think of. It took a few days, but after about a week, Jez started blowing up my phone. Apology after apology. Suddenly, he was the man I met again, full of humility and self-awareness. He acknowledged the awful way he had treated me and sent me walls and walls of well-thought-out messages, psychoanalyzing his own behavior, where it comes from, and the ways he knows it needs to change. I took him back. Like a dumb, desperate girl. I took him back. It wasn't long into this second round that he started to guilt me over the breakup. My panic had damaged his relationship with the people in my life, and he made sure that I knew it was my responsibility to fix it. It wasn't long after this that my car ended up breaking down at a gas station close to home. There was a very nice couple in the vehicle next to me that came to my rescue and checked things out under my hood. The gentleman turned out to be a mechanic for a living, so he had a pretty good theory about what could potentially be going on. By this time, I'd already attempted to contact Jez to let him know what was going on and where I was. It wasn't long till he got off of work, so he told me to sit tight and he would be there shortly. Meanwhile, this sweet couple stayed put and kept me company while I waited. Jez barreled in about 15 minutes later, completely ignoring the couple that had helped me. Touching base, the gentleman handed me a slip of paper with a name and phone number on it, reviewing what he thought was going on with my car. before Jez butted in, cutting him off. "I said she's fine," he snapped. I could see the woman out of the corner of my eye slink away at this comment and get into the passenger seat of their car. I could feel the sudden tension, like maybe she's been here before. The gentleman didn't move and shifted his attention to me as Jez walked into the store. I could see he was clearly concerned. "Are you okay?" he asked in a low, almost whisper. "You don't have to answer that, but if you need anything." He looked down at the number in my hand and nodded to it. "Seriously." With that, he got into the driver's seat of his car and drove away. I've thought about that couple countless times since that night. Everything went right back to the way it was before, as though the initial breakup never even happened. The same eggshells, the same belittling. If anything, it was worse, because I had permanently damaged our relationship. If I had not just been so dramatic, if I didn't run away from everything, then maybe he wouldn't have to work so hard for respect in my life. One night we got into an argument. I don't even remember what it was about, but I had to be up early for work the next morning, so I paused the argument in order to get some sleep. When I went to lay down, I heard the TV turn on. I have a sound bar, so the volume can get pretty loud. Jez proceeded to turn the volume up, and up, and up. Far past any volume I ever pushed those same speakers to, even for parties. The very walls were reverberating with the sound of the TV at astronomical volumes. Jez then started laughing hysterically. It was a laughter manic with anger, as though something might be funny on TV, but he might also jump through a window right now. I remember laying in bed absolutely horrified at what was happening. I knew things had gone bad, but now I was scared. I got out of bed and asked him to turn it down, to which he responded, scoffing, "I'll watch TV if I fucking want to," and turn it up even louder. I felt like I was in a horror movie. I started crying at this point, begging him to please just let me sleep. He started mocking me and calling names for crying. "Oh wow, poor baby is crying again. That's your card, isn't it? Crying." This caused the fight to start again, and he started screaming at me, followed me to my bedroom, where he suddenly punched the door, not 2 inches from my head. His eyes were black, and he looked me in my eye, sending the clear, unsympathetic, and hostile message that was a warning. Next time he wouldn't miss. My whole system had shut down at this point, and I sunk to the floor in a panic attack. My ex-husband had issues with violence. Jez knew that. All our rentals prior to that, one had holes in walls and doors peppered throughout our unit due to my ex-husband's inability to handle his own emotions, but he never hit me, or even came close to it. I crumpled to the ground feeling powerless, trapped and afraid. As my thoughts continued to race, he continued to berate and mock my panic state. Most of our argument from that night was a blur, but ended abruptly once he threatened to put my social security number on the dark web. At this point, all that was left in me was to fight. I blacked out and went ballistic, screaming at him to get out. I felt rabid and dangerous as I screamed like a banshee for him to leave my home. It was over, and I was ending it that second. I contacted my landlord and explained what had been going on. Jez would also end up contacting her, weaving his own tale that I was moving out and tried to have the lease transferred into his name. Luckily, since I was several steps ahead of him, my landlord didn't fall for it and contacted me immediately. She personally came and changed my locks for me, gave me the personal contact of a police officer close by in case he showed up again, and took half of my rent off for the next month. I'm forever grateful to her for these simple acts of kindness that are above and beyond anything I would ever expect from a landlord. It took weeks for him to stop messaging me. The only reason I didn't block him was out of fear that he would show up at my house. Though I had contacts for protection, I knew I'd rather get a daily apology video than have to deal with him on my doorstep. So they persisted. For a while. The same act from before. The love bombing, the promises, grasping at straws, trying to find the weak spot where I'd let him back in. But I ignored it. I continued for weeks before he finally gave up. He bowed out gracefully, stating boldly that he will always love me. I left him on red. The illusion was destroyed. It took me several years to pick up the pieces. If my divorce wasn't enough, this definitely made me lose trust in myself. I still don't understand what the end game was. In one of our last discussions, I asked him desperately, what happened to the guy I fell in love with? Jez looked at me dead in the eye, smirked, and said, "That guy doesn't exist. I told you what I had to tell you in order to get you away from that fucking asshole husband of yours. You're just stupid and fell for it. Jez, let's not meet ever again." I think there is someone living in my shed. Title says it all, but it also doesn't say anything. Lately, I've been noticing something off about home, like there's something else there with me. My wife and our 2 dogs, but I have not been able to put my finger on it until today. For some context, I live in a duplex. We share this property with another guy in his mid-20s. He has his own house and we have ours, but we share the laundry room that leads to our respective backyards that are separated by a fence. This all started about 2 months ago when the guy sent me a text. "Hey man, just a heads up, someone stole my bike out of the sunroom." This is extra creepy because to get to our sun/laundry room, you would need to hop the brick fence surrounded by shrubby trees and then hurl the bike over, unless the thief had the most massive pair of balls ever and walked it out through one of our front doors when we weren't home. Either way, I didn't feel right and made more of an effort to keep the door locked. Fast forward to a couple of weeks ago. I let my dogs into the backyard, and one of them starts sniffing at the shed. No big deal. The lizards are coming out with it heating up. They probably just chased one under the door. I finally got them to come in, but didn't give it much thought. I hardly ever go into that shed. Nothing wrong with it. It's just kind of out of the way, and I'm not really a hang out in the shed type of guy. So we generally use it for storage, suitcases, furniture that doesn't fit/match the house, camping stuff, boring suburban shit. We probably enter it maybe 3 times a year. After the 18th day in a row of my dogs being curious about the shed, I decided to give a little look-see to see if maybe there was a Komodo dragon or something in there, since they wouldn't let this thing go. Nope, no Komodo. But what I did find literally made me piss myself just a little bit. Just a few drops. Inside the shed was the bike that my neighbor had stolen a little while back. My first thought was, oh fuck, my wife is a klepto, but quickly ruled that out. She doesn't even like to bike. Then I was briefly worried that my neighbor thought that I was the thief. I mean, it's in my shed. I don't know how to explain that if he found out. Plus, I wanted to give him his bike back. I kept looking around and found one of our sleeping bags unraveled but balled up behind a box. Inside of it was what looked like to be around $20 in change and singles. There was also a bag for garbage and had lots of food wrappers inside. Eventually, my brain accepted what it was ultimately denying at first and put 2 and 2 together. Someone, I don't know, is living in my shed. Or at least was. Maybe my dogs spooked them off, or maybe they sleep there every night and leave during the day. If they weren't coming back, why would they leave the change? I left everything how I found it and was thinking about what I should do next. Whoever did it must have gotten in through the spare set of keys I keep hidden in my backyard. I locked up and brought them inside with me tonight. Hopefully whoever it is gets the message and moves on. I'm going to install cameras tomorrow. I'll keep you guys updated if anything more happens. Please hope for the best and that this person isn't a lunatic. Possible murderer/serial killer encounter in Maine. Not really sure how to begin this, and my title may make more sense after reading my experience. I'll try to be as brief/concise as possible. Summer of 2004. My family was supposed to vacation in Kennebunkport, Maine. My father was stuck in meetings, so he was going to come up from Manhattan a few days after us. My mom wanted to drive up, super annoying to me at the time. We didn't have a choice, and my brother, sister, and I loaded into the car and started the drive. I was about 14 at the time. Drive was uneventful, but there were various delays, and we ended up getting in a lot later than originally planned. Because of this, the owners of the house we were renting from had turned in for the night, and we weren't able to get a hold of them to get the keys. Sounds like horrible planning, but apparently they were pretty strict about the time frame to pick up the keys. My mom, unfazed, decided she wanted lobster, so we went to one of our favorite spots. She called my dad to see if he could make us reservations at a hotel in Kennebunkport, from New York City while we ate. We were enjoying the lobster while a guy came up and started chatting with my mom. I figured it was just a friendly local making conversation. During this, my dad calls my mom and my mom excuses herself to speak to him. Apparently, all hotels were booked for the nights, go figure. Height of vacation season in Kenbunkport. The plan was for us to drive to the nearest town and just find somewhere to stay until we could pick up the keys for our vacation home. Apparently, the local had been listening into my mom's conversation and came back over once she got off the phone. I want to say, there was nothing outwardly off about him. He was preppy, clean-cut, unassuming, and fit in with the clientele. He told my mom he had a big home with a big guest house we were more than welcome to stay at, and his wife wouldn't mind. Immediately, my reaction was, F that. No way in the world I was staying in a random dude's house in creepy Maine in the dark. No offense to anyone from Maine, but the streets get creepy. My mom, doing her due diligence, determined this guy was legit. Said he was in finance. My mom was an investment banker. And they chatted enough for my mom to determine he wasn't totally full of it. I called my dad hysterical. He said I was overreacting and that I needed to get out of the city more and accept that sometimes people are just nice. So my brother, sister, and I got into our car and followed him back to his house. The guest house was really nice, fully furnished, but the beds were oddly placed. The guest house had 2 bedrooms, and instead of the beds being located in the middle/centered, imagine a symmetrical room layout, they are right under the window in each room. Just seemed kind of out of place. Anyway, fast forward. We were all getting ready to go to bed. My mom hears a knock on the door and it's the guy. He said he was just checking in to make sure we all got settled. Cool. Nice thing to do. About 30 minutes later, he comes back to check in again. At this point, my mom was like, thanks, we're good. We will stop by the house in the morning to say thank you, etc. Fast forward another 30 to 45 minutes. I can't sleep. I'm terrified. We hear this rustling, which is odd because the guest house was nowhere around trees or close proximity to bushes that might cause such a noise. At this point, I see my mom wide awake and look up at the window, like motioning towards the window with her eyes. Let me add, none of the windows had curtains. The guy said it's because his wife was in the process of redecorating. When I looked up, there was a male figure, just standing. I thought I was going to have a heart attack. I don't know how long he was there for. When he walked away, my mom waited a bit and then told us to get our stuff together. She wasn't messing around. We had my dad out on the phone at this point. He was pretty much flipping out at my mom about something, but I didn't hear what. My mom said she was going to put our stuff in the car and to follow her out. This was around 2 a.m. When we got into the car, we pulled around to the front of the main house so my mom could return the key and say thanks and get the fuck out of there. However, when we got to the front, all the lights were off. Not just all lights, but it looked like no one had been home. Porch light, table lamp in front windows, everything black. Also, the 2 cars were gone, the local's car, and what we presumed to be his wife's car. After seeing this, my mom, at this point pretty unsettled, said we were leaving and we proceeded to drive to the gate. The gate at the end of the driveway had been deadbolted, or padlocked, shut from the inside. It wasn't a super strong gate, so my dad said rev it. We were in a big SUV, and just get out of there. We drove straight back to New York City, not speaking the entire time. We have never returned back to Maine, and my parents refused to speak about it. I asked a family member one night about it when he was drunk, and all he said was, "They didn't tell you?" The actual owners of that house were on vacation. I'm assuming my mom or dad followed up with local authorities and figured that out, but never told us. I don't know who that man was or what was planned that evening. I was curious as to whether there were any known serial killers or murderers who were in the area at that time, whether traveling through, etc. Sorry for the long post, just trying to be thorough. The night I learned to not sneak out. To start this off, I'd like to give a bit of context. This happened 4 years ago. I'm a girl, and at the time this happened, I was 12, going on 13 in just a month or two. The friend I mentioned in the story was 14 at the time. The friend, Sally, who I was staying with that night, 14, female, was quite a bit older than me. At least at the time, the 2-year age gap was quite big. At 12 to 13 years old, I was about to start my second year of middle school, whereas Sally should have been about to begin her sophomore year of high school. I met her in the beginning of my first year at a new school. She was older than the other kids in our grade and was considered one of the popular kids. I think that was what drew me to her first. We became fast friends, and before we knew it, we were spending every single weekend together. Seriously, every single weekend. Nothing seemed to be out of the ordinary. It was your typical Friday night. We carpooled to her family's apartment after school. I've always been a picky eater, so when her family had dinner, I didn't eat with them. I just snacked on the Pop-Tart that I'd stowed away in my backpack in case they ordered something that I wouldn't eat. Something to note is that her family was pretty religious. I wouldn't go as far to say they were fanatics, but they didn't allow their kids to watch horror movies or anything that was rated PG-13 or older. It didn't stem from the desire to protect them from something inappropriate. Sally's mother had an irrational fear that scary movies had satanic messages. We asked to watch The Purge, and her mom obviously said no. After some negotiating, she agreed to let us watch Hunger Games instead. After the movie, Sally and I went to hang out in her room. She put on some music, and being the age we were, we gave each other some makeovers. By the end of it, we were looking much older than just 12 and 14. This part of the night is where things started to seem off to me. Sally wasn't the most positive influence, despite being my best friend at the time. She was manipulative and got off on putting me down. She had a habit of talking to men online and lying about her age. Sally showed me some texts between her and the man she was talking to. I can't give you the exact recount of them, but they consisted of him trying to convince her to meet up with him, and just the usual thing you'd expect from a creep online. According to him, he was 19, tall, and blonde with soulful blue eyes. Once I saw the text, I asked if she had a picture of him. Something didn't sit right with me after seeing the messages. She showed me what he looked like, and he was very clearly not 19. This man was at least 40. It looked like he lived in his mother's basement. Then we got a call from him. Sally answered without hesitation. And when I heard the voice on the other end of the call, I felt like I was going to be sick. "You're so pretty. Why don't you come meet me?" he asked. Sally said that she couldn't because she was spending the night with a friend. The mention of that sparked his interest, and then he proceeded to try and ask both to meet him. Sally, lacking any common sense, said yes. Thus begun her plan for us to sneak out and walk 15 blocks to meet him in a deserted McDonald's parking lot. I didn't want to go. I was raised on stories of what happens to teen girls who meet random men from the internet in person. But after adamant pleading from Sally that she didn't feel safe going by herself, I agreed. We took our phones with us for the walk. I had a kitchen knife stuffed in my bra in case something were to happen and I needed to defend myself. The route we had to take to get there didn't have very many street lamps, and there weren't any houses. We were surrounded by trees on both sides of us. When we got to the parking lot, the only car parked nearby was a black beat-up 2000 Toyota Corolla. The car was still running when we got there, and from what we could tell, there was more than one person inside. The man from the picture got out of the front seat and left the door open behind him before approaching us. I turned my flash on so I could see, and he was obviously on something. I can't tell you what kind of drug it was for the life of me, but his eyes were so wide they looked like they were about to pop out of his head. He was jittery and kept twitching. I became very conscious of how big he was, maybe 6'2" and around 280 pounds. For reference, my friend and I did not look our ages, even without makeup. I'm about 5'2", my friend was pretty tall, probably around 5'6" to 5'7". We were both significantly smaller than him. The man reached out for us and caught my friend by the arm. I went to get my knife as quickly as I could, and that's when I saw his friends getting out of the car. He invited us back to his car and offered us booze and drugs, but after seeing my knife that I was ready to call the police, he released my friend. I took Sally's arm and ran faster than I ever had in my entire life. We took the long way home to avoid them finding out where she lived in case they were following us. Once we got there, her family was still sound asleep. We locked all the doors, closed the blinds, and blocked them on everything. There wouldn't be any sleeping that night. We were constantly peeking out the windows, and to our dismay, the same Toyota was circling around our apartment building. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. I never mentioned any of this to my parents out of fear of getting grounded or in trouble. I'm 16 now, and they still have no clue. I still get nervous when I see a car similar to the one from that night. As for Sally, her parents never found out either. We agreed to never speak about it again. Thankfully, she moved into a new house just a few weeks after that happened. Safe to say, Sally and I haven't spoken 3 years. She was pissed at me for ruining her night, and our friendship didn't last long after that. We had a pretty bad falling out, but looking back on it now, it was definitely for the better. So, to Sally, thank you for teaching me a very valuable lesson and making me realize that some people are best just left alone. And to the man and his friends who tried to prey upon 2 young girls, let's not ever fucking meet again. People can be absolutely creepy. Hi, I'm a 24-year-old lad living in the UK. I work as a pharmacist at a hospital and I usually do night shifts. My workplace is just a few lots away from home, so I just walk every night. A few months ago, while I was on my way to work at around midnight, a car stopped in front of me and rolled down his window. The guy inside was wearing a scrub suit, so I'm assuming he's a nurse. Have dark hair, chubby, and is probably around my age. Hey, where are you heading? Let me drive you to work. I politely declined. The guy looked harmless, and I guess being polite wouldn't hurt. He looked pretty normal, but there's something in his eyes that unsettles me. He didn't go away after that, and kept insisting to drive me to work. That's when I snapped and told him that I was waiting for my boyfriend, which isn't true because my boyfriend is in the US miles away from me. He seemed to believe in it and just drove away. Days have passed when I got a chat request. I tried to check the profile and saw that it was the creepy lad offering to ride me to work. How he got my name? I have no idea. I didn't pay his chat any attention and just went on with my pretty busy life. 2 days after that, I got another message from him saying, "You were smiling earlier. You look cute." After reading that message, it felt like I had been splashed with an ice-cold bucket of water. Was he at the hospital? I didn't want to know. I told him to stay away from me and F off. Days have passed and I've almost forgotten about this guy when I saw him, standing on the hallway looking at me while I was exiting the room doing rounds. He tried to approach, but I beelined my way to the other hallway and went back to the pharmacy. That's when I started freaking out and told my boyfriend. He advised me to just drive to work instead of walking, and I did right after that night. I also blocked him to avoid any unwanted future creepy messages. So far, I haven't seen him in months, and I want to keep it that way. So, to the creepy lad who kept on insisting in driving me to work and stalked me at work, let's not meet again. Small town mentality. Lock your doors. I grew up in a small town, the type where people don't really lock their doors. At least they didn't used to. When I was about 14 female, I got a call to babysit for one of my regulars who had 3 daughters. It was December, so a lot of Christmas work parties were going on. I arrived and we went over to the usual rules. She mentioned the TV upstairs was out, so once I put the girls to bed, just head down there to watch TV. And so after playing with the girls for a while, I sent them off to their bed and headed downstairs. I spent a few hours channel surfing. It was around 1:30 a.m. I remember grabbing the phone, though I can't remember who I was calling, maybe my mom or my sister, to let them know I would be really late. But I heard the door open upstairs, which sort of surprised me. The mom enjoyed the nights I babysat, as she knew I was a night owl who could be there super late, like 3 in the morning, provided she held the cab for me. It was a small town, but I live on the other side of it. As I headed upstairs, I heard someone stumble, so I picked up my pace to make sure she was okay, only to find 3 people I had never seen before. There was a clearly drunk woman lying in the doorway and 2 guys. The guys looked as surprised to see me as I was them. I asked why they were there. The girl had slurred out that they were there for a party. I was confused and asked if they knew Helen, the mother. One of the guys looked me up and down, and I began getting even more uncomfortable at the whole situation. He asked if I was here alone. I remember not wanting to answer because all I could think of was the fact that there were 3 little girls sleeping in the house. I decided instead of answering him, I would simply state there was no party here and they needed to leave. The girl was adamant that she was here for the party. The guy who had asked me the question took a step forward. I demanded this time they leave, and we all heard the sound of a phone button being pushed. I'd forgotten it was even in my hand, but it seemed to be enough to startle the guy who thought I pushed it on purpose. The guy quickly told the other guy they were leaving and helped the woman up. As soon as they were outside, I slammed the door and locked it and quickly ran to the front window and watched them. They continued up the block, so it wasn't merely messing up the house numbers for them. The mom returned home 2 hours later and was confused why the door was locked. She was too drunk, so I just told her it made me feel safe. I feel stupid for not telling someone, but they didn't really do anything. To the 3 drunks that one winter night, let's not meet again. The tip jar, a scary encounter working at a bikini coffee stand at 4 a.m. I am not willing to share the evidence that earned the verified flair with anyone else except the mods for obvious reasons. The tip jar. Against the advice of my parents, I started working at a bikini coffee stand when I was 17 years old and continued working there until I was 20. If you are unfamiliar with bikini coffee stands, they are little drive-through espresso stands, usually painted in some neon color, or the employees all wear lingerie or bikinis while they serve coffee. I know this sounds strange, and believe me, it is strange. However, the money was good. It was fun at the time, and my parents couldn't really afford to pay for college. There is no loudspeaker where customers place their order. They simply drive up to the stand, order coffee, and make small talk as they ogle you in your skimpy symbol. Anyway, it's kind of hard to explain, so maybe just Google it. The Seattle area has them all over the place. Within a matter of months, the boss gave me the busiest shift. The shift began at 4 a.m. and ended at 9:30 a.m. Though the coffee stand was not officially open until 4:30, I had to count the till, grind the espresso beans, fill up the sinks, take stock, clean if needed, etc. The coffee stand was situated in the corner of a large parking lot, sharing the enormous empty lot with only one other retailer. The other retailer didn't open until around 10 a.m., and so when I arrived, the lot was completely dark, save for one dim street lamp above the stand and another in the far corner of the lot. I pulled up to the stand as I normally did, only this time it was my first shift alone. Normally, I worked with one other girl, as the shift would get far too busy for just one person. I had the routine with regular customers, as I literally worked every single day. The boss didn't believe in time off unless requested. While I worked, I could see cars approach the stand and know immediately what drink to prepare, based on my recognizing a regular customer's vehicle. After almost a year on the morning shift, it was rare to see a new vehicle or meet a new customer. My boss was extremely strict about being fast and efficient. He would have us prepare drinks in advance for our regulars while they waited in the line of cars. My boss was so strict that for the first 6 months of my working there, he would watch constantly on his camera system and call me on the business phone to scream at me for the lack of efficiency. After this, I became so fast at preparing drinks, I guess he decided he would save money by having me work alone in the very early morning hours. He was stingy too. So, like normal, I approached the stand and punched in the access code. I went inside and turned on some music right away to keep myself company. The street lamp directly above the coffee stand had burnt out a few days before, so it was rather dark outside. Coupled with the tinted sliding windows of the coffee stand and the knowledge that I was completely alone, I felt a little creeped out. Though not nearly as creeped out and terrified as I was about to feel in a few minutes. Even though the stand was technically open at 4:30, I wouldn't expect my first customer until about 4:45. I usually arrived at 4, but since it was my first shift alone, I came in at 3:30 to give myself enough time to complete all of the opening tasks. My first customer was always Dave. He drove a red sports car and ordered a double cappuccino, heavy on the foam. He worked for the local Boeing plant and would brag about his high-ranking job in between awkward remarks about my body. You would get used to this sort of thing after a while, but nothing could prepare me for the sort of thing that happened to me on this particular dark morning. Though many of the customers were pervy men like Dave, most of the early morning customers weren't as lecherous as one would expect. They simply needed coffee, and no other business was open as early as ours. In fact, many of my early morning customers were married men in soccer mom vans, in desperate need of caffeine. I glanced up at the clock as I opened the money in the till. 3:50 a.m. I finished the count and walked from the back of the stand onto the main floor. There were 2 steps separating the back of the stand from the main floor. The back of the stand had no windows and contained a bathroom, large refrigerator, washer, dryer, etc. This is the area where many of my coworkers and myself would get ready and joke around where customers couldn't see us. As soon as we walked onto the main floor where customers could see us, uniform was required, meaning lingerie or bikini, as well as heels. That morning I was wearing a matching pink lingerie set with knit stockings. The lingerie fully covered my breasts and buttocks and provided more coverage than a typical bikini you would see at a beach. I counted all of the syrup bottles. I opened the fridge and took stock inside. I turned on the espresso grinder and robotically poured in a bag of espresso beans. I started filling up the large commercial sink with soapy water. Music played softly on the stereo. Then I heard it. Over the noise of faucet, coffee grinder, and the music, I wasn't sure I heard anything at first, so I just ignored it. Then I heard it again. Tap, tap, tap. Someone was tapping on the sliding glass window of the stand. I wiped off my wet hands and grabbed my cell phone. 4:15 a.m. We weren't open for another 15 minutes. I checked the light switches to make sure I didn't accidentally flip on the open sign. Along with an open sign, the stand was equipped with bright floodlights to illuminate the presence of the stand due to the sheer darkness that morning. I'd contemplated turning on the floodlights when I first arrived, but it was strictly forbidden to do so until the stand was open. Without the floodlights on, and through the tinted glass, I could not see who was on the other side. I stood there, staring at the window. Maybe it's just Dave, I rationalized to myself. Tap, tap, tap. I could hear my heart thumping in my ears. The tapping had definitely grew louder. I picked up the business phone and punched in my boss's number. He had an extensive camera system, complete with night vision, and could see in real time both inside and outside of the stand. In the very least, he could tell me who was outside. The phone rang and rang, no answer. I flipped on the floodlights. I walked over to the window and saw the man, now illuminated by the bright lights. His head was pressed up against the glass, hands cupped around his eyes as he tried to see in. I jumped back. "Hi," he yelled through the glass. "Can I get some coffee?" "We aren't open for another 15 minutes, I replied. "My boss will be mad if I open early." "Oh, well, I can wait." The man then walked away from the window and stepped into a small black Honda. I continued my opening duties, warily eyeing the black Honda. At the time, I felt a false sense of security, lulled into the daily routine of my shift. However, this was different. At 4:30, I dutifully turned on the open sign and watched as the man in the black Honda drove up to the window. He was wearing a dark red baseball cap, a thermal shirt, and plaid pajama pants. I opened the sliding window. "Hi, sorry about that. What can I get for you this morning?" I said, trying to sound as normal as possible. The man looked at me for what felt like an eternity. "What I want doesn't appear to be on the menu," he said, not looking up from my crotch. "Okay, so I know what you're thinking. What did I expect working in this profession? Gentlemen?" I brushed his comment aside with a laugh. "We have a great white chocolate mocha." I looked around frantically. Where the fuck was the usual morning guy, Dave? I silently prayed another customer would pull up behind this guy. He looked away and stared at his steering wheel. "I want you to be my maid." "Excuse me?" I said, not sure if I heard him correctly. "I want you to be my maid. I want you to come over to my house wearing a maid costume with nothing underneath. I want to watch you. If you don't clean correctly, I am going to do whatever I want to you." He paused and gripped his steering wheel tightly. "I'm not a nice guy." He looked up at me and smiled. Until that point in my life, I had never seen a truly sinister smile before. I slammed the long serving window shut. I ran to the back of the stand, hyperventilating at this point. I picked up the phone and called my boss repeatedly, no answer. I stood on the steps and peered out the window. The black Honda was gone, replaced by the familiar red of Dave's sports car. I never thought I would be happy to see pervy Dave, but here I was, rushing to the serving window to tell him what had happened. I opened the window, all the while frantically relaying the story. Dave just laughed and muttered something about the guy dreaming. He told me that I was just being paranoid and the guy just had no filter. For some reason, this put me at ease. Dave reached his hand out of the window to place a $5 bill in my tip jar. He tipped this amount each morning. Wow, he explained. You just opened and your tip jar is already full. I know I make good coffee, but it's not that great. Huh? I said, slamming the register shut. The tip jar rested on the outside window ledge so customers couldn't reach it. I made it a habit of just leaving it outside in between customers, as it could get very busy. I leaned over and looked into the metal canister. Inside the tip jar was a long white envelope that appeared to be stuffed to its capacity. My stomach turned, as I knew it had to be from the guy in the black Honda. Dave, I said cautiously. It's from that guy I just told you about. I'm not opening that. Dave sipped his cappuccino and suddenly his goofy demeanor turned serious. You're right, let me open it. I have gloves. It was late fall and rather cold out. Dave put on his gloves in a dramatic manner, laughing about my paranoia, and proceeded to step outside of his car. He took the envelope out of my tip jar and opened it. Holy shit, he said, his eyes widening. He held up a stack of $20 bills held together by a rubber band. On the back of the stack was a folded up piece of paper. He unfolded the paper and began reading it. His eyes grew even wider. His hands were shaking ever so slightly. What? What does it say? He simply said, "Get dressed and call the police." I snatched the note from him, his jaw slightly agape. The note was laden with spelling errors and looked as if it was written in a child's hand. Oddly, there was rather long words that were attempted but spelled incorrectly. It said some very deranged things. There are some things too sick to mention here, but I'll relay the basic message as best as I can recall. Some things you just never forget, even if you want to. So, here it is, without the spelling errors and the length. It was 2 pages long, front and back. You will come to my house. When you arrive, I will examine you thoroughly. I will then tie you to the post, and you will be punished for what you do. Every inch of your body will be bruised and sore. Afterward, I will untie you and use you in every way possible. He used a different term, but it is extremely graphic and includes the words hogtied. You can scream, but no one will hear you. This is your first payment. Upon reading this note and taking this money, you have agreed to follow through. If you do not follow through, you are a stealing, lying whore, and you will be punished more severely than if you cooperated to this initial agreement. You will clean every inch of my house. There will be no mistakes, or there will be more punishment to follow. I got dressed and called the police and my boss, who finally answered. The police arrived and I went to the station to explain in detail what happened. I handed them the note, along with the money for evidence. The female police officer, who appeared to be in charge, nonchalantly told me that I should probably quit my job, that this behavior was to be expected from customers. I told her that I have never experienced anything like this before. My boss reviewed the outside videotape footage. The footage showed a man standing outside of the coffee stand window just staring inside. Occasionally it showed him leaning his head into the glass and cupping his hands around his eyes for a better view. It also showed him rubbing his crotch. Apparently, he'd been standing outside the window since 3:40 a.m., 10 minutes after my initial arrival. At one point, it showed him going back into his car only to re-emerge several minutes later and finally tap on the window. I was shocked to realize that the man had watched me for almost a full hour without my knowledge. I felt stupid and most of all scared. The footage also revealed that the man had his license plates covered with what appeared to be white paper. After reviewing the footage and the note, the police decided that the man posed a potential threat, and that this behavior was not normal. Duh. They sent an undercover cop back to the stand with me. I was shocked that they wanted me to go right back to work not even 2 hours after the incident. The cop sat outside in an SUV while I worked. The plan was this. If the man drove through again, I was to flick the open sign on and off to alert him of the man's presence. I worked, serving all of my regular customers, trying my best to pretend nothing happened. I was told not to recall the incident to any of my coworkers or customers that morning, in case they knew the man and warned him of police involvement. The man did not return that day. But he did return. Little did I know the day was only the beginning of a year-long nightmare. Edit number 2. To all of those who ask, this happened well over 6 years ago. Final update and conclusion. I've been inundated with messages for part 2. Unfortunately, I'm unable to post the rest of the story for LNM because series posts are no longer allowed. I posted part 2 on No Sleep, but unfortunately the guidelines do not allow users to continue stories from LNM over on No Sleep. I'm sure you can find part 2 in a paste bin somewhere, but I will keep it simple and relay a short version of the conclusion. I fully intended to complete this series. Unfortunately, I no longer wish to invest the time nor the energy to keep posting the rest of the story, only to have it removed by moderators. Which I understand, rules are rules. So I will end this with letting you all know that I am fine now. I'll give you a quick synopsis of how things turned out. The stalking continued for a while, about a year. The stalker left endless creepy gifts for me both at work and at my place of residence, all of which he signed off on as Turner. It got to a point where I couldn't prove it was him because it would often be sent by a courier or a third party. He continued to come by the stand, and at one point, he even promised to leave me alone. My coworker was there. We actually managed to have a very brief discussion in which he apologized and agreed that his behavior was inappropriate. However, he resumed his creepy behavior just days later. The police were of no help and kept insisting me that it would all go away if I just quit my job. I had his license plate, which was out of state, and vehicle description, but apparently the car wasn't even registered. I did not even know this was a possibility. Despite taking a leave of absence, the stalking continued. I didn't want to quit my job, as this was shortly after the recession. My mom, the sole provider of a family of 5, had lost her job, so I wanted to chip in and help her so they wouldn't lose the house. Other bikini stands in the area were not hiring due to the being embroiled in prostitution scandals, all of which were heavily covered by the national media. You have no idea how hard it was, and maybe still is, to get a normal job after having worked as a bikini barista. Employers don't like it on your job history too much. The few of the scariest incidences were being assaulted at an ice freezer outside of the coffee stand. Thankfully, he didn't harm me physically, just grabbed me and touched me inappropriately. Turner coming through the drive-thru completely naked and J-Oing into a pair of women's underwear. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say all of this on LNM, and a quick snook note, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say this on YouTube, so I kind of tried to, censor it a bit. But anyways, back to the story. I've previously omitted this from my story due to the explicit SA nature. If this is in violation of the guidelines, please let me know before removing my post. I will remove it. Another incident occurred when my friend gave me a joint a customer had left for me on her shift. Crazy as it may sound, my regulars fairly often would leave joints in my tip jar instead of money. I like to smoke a lot at the time. I asked my coworker for the customer's name, but she didn't get a chance to ask for it. I was told by my friend/coworker that he had long hair and looked like a hippie. This fits the description of a customer who'd regularly leave joints in my tip jar. I smoked the joint before I went to sleep one night, only to have a massive freakout, full of hallucinations, hysteria, etc. I literally thought I saw ghosts, demons, and fire. I ended up in the hospital. I found out in the hospital that, in addition to having marijuana in my system, I also had a bunch of PCP in my system as well. Later on, Turner would take credit for this joint by sending a text to my phone, letting me know that if I wanted him to smoke me out, that we could get together sometime. I guess he thought this weed was enjoyable. Ha. Of course I gave his number to the police. I feel like I gave them enough information to get this guy, but I was just never taken seriously, or they had bigger fish to fry. They did find, however, that the phone he used was a burner. Again, I did not plan on and did not previously include this in my story. Just typing this out is giving me horrible flashbacks to that time on PCP. I do my best to never think about this or bring it up. In this period of time, it was evident that one of my coworkers was sharing my personal information with Turner in exchange for money, or maybe just because she didn't like me. This coworker was later arrested on prostitution charges. I ended up relocating and changing my last name, which is surprisingly easy to do. I did this primarily to get away from Turner, but also so I could get a fresh start with a new employment history and get away from the negative energy that had circled my life. I had taken nude photos of myself or my boyfriend at the time and after we broke up, he leaked them to everyone on my contact list, including my coworkers, of course. This meant Turner most likely got a hold of the photos as well. It may seem strange to you, but after a while, the stalking becomes part of your life. It's kind of like living around a bunch of rattlesnakes. You may feel constantly on guard and on edge, but eventually you work your daily routine around trying your best to avoid the snakes so you don't get bitten. When it happens, you do your best to move on. I have recently found out, within the last few months, that a man fitting my stalker's description was incarcerated some time ago for doing something even more frightening to another barista in the PNW. There were also similar incidences in reports of a man driving through bikini stands naked or with women's underwear. I suspect that this man was most likely Turner. I cannot be sure if it is the same person, as I never was able to find out this person's true first and last name, but I am hopeful that it is him, and he'll be locked away for a very long time. I was almost cooked alive. When I was 10, my parents and I went to visit my grandmother for spring break. My cousin also came to visit, and we decided we wanted to go to the YMCA for the day. My grandmother dropped us off and said she would come and pick us up in 4 hours. On that day, the YMCA was empty. There were a couple of adults in the exercise room, but that's it. We went to the basketball court, and after 2 hours of playing tag and shooting baskets, we were bored. I've never been the biggest fan of swimming, but this YMCA had a pretty cool pool, so we changed into our bathing suits and headed in there. The pool was empty except for the lifeguard. We played a bunch of games and swam laps, but after about an hour, there wasn't much left to do, and there was no one except us to hang out with to keep things interesting. So we decided to play a game of seeing how long we could hold our breath underwater. We stood in the shallow end near the clock on the wall so we could time ourselves. Instead of fully submerging, we just stuck our heads face down in the water. We did this a couple of times and I was winning. On our last round, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I figured it was my cousin giving up and telling me that I won, but instead it was a lifeguard who told me to knock it off or she was going to have to ask us to leave the pool. Since we were tired of being in the pool, we figured we would get out, get dressed, and go back to the basketball court until my grandmother picked us up. We only had an hour left anyways and the water was freezing. As we got out, the lifeguard stopped us and asked if we wanted to go into the sauna to warm up and dry off. The sign said 18 years or older, so of course we were super excited that she allowed us to do that. She walked us to the sauna and locked the door. The door was glass and the interior was made of entirely out of wood. Inside, above the door, there was a clock, probably to help make sure you were not in there for an unsafe amount of time. The lifeguard stand was adjacent to the sauna, but if you looked out the door, you could clearly see it. She followed us in and went over to the thermometer encased in plastic and unlocked it so she could crank up the heat. I figured that she must have to turn it on each time, so I didn't think anything of it. Both my cousin and I were very short girls, and so we couldn't see the temperature that was printed on the thermometer knob, but I know she was turning up the heat. Then she left and shut the door behind her. I thought I saw her lock the door too, but I thought to myself, why would she lock the door when we might want to get out? I checked the clock and decided we should get out in 10 or 15 minutes. It was already pretty warm in the sauna, but now the room was blazing. It felt nice because I was so cold from the pool. After about 15 minutes, it was starting to get a little bit too hot, and my cousin agreed that we should leave so we can get dressed. I went to turn the knob on the door, but it wasn't budging. I thought maybe it was jammed, so I shook it, but it still wasn't opening, and then I let my cousin try. She couldn't get it open either. We figured the lifeguard would be back in a couple of minutes, so we sat back down and waited. The room was getting hotter now too, and I really wanted to leave. I got up and started banging on the door and shaking/twisting the knob, trying to get the lifeguard's attention. My cousin got up and joined me. We started screaming at the top of our lungs for her to let us out, but she just stared straight ahead. I don't think there's any way that she couldn't have noticed or heard two little girls banging and kicking the door and screaming. Now we had been in there for about 25 minutes. It was so hot in the sauna that it hurt to breathe. It felt like my lungs were on fire. My eyes and skin were burning. We sat back down and put our towels over our heads because they were still a little damp and it made it easier to breathe. I was so worried about my cousin as she is a couple of years younger than me. I looked at the clock and saw that we'd been in there for 35 minutes. I got up and walked to the door again and saw the lifeguard still just staring straight ahead. Again, I tried to get her attention by screaming that we needed it out and banging on the door as hard as I could, but still nothing. I was starting to get pretty dizzy, so I went to go sit back down, but the wooden seats on the sauna were burned my skin. My towel was completely dry, so I put it underneath me to sit on. My hair was also dry, but I wrapped it across my face to cover my nose, and I squinted my eyes so that they didn't burn as bad, but I could still watch if anyone walked past the door. It helped a little bit. My cousin was laying face down with the towel over her head, not moving or saying anything, so I nudged her to make sure that she was still okay. She was, but I could tell that we really needed to get out of there soon because she seemed a little bit disoriented. It had been 45 minutes now, and I was extremely nauseous. There was no way that the lifeguard would forget that we were in there, and I thought she would have to come back soon, but there was this little voice in my head telling me that maybe she purposely locked us in there. Finally, a man walked past the door towards the pool, but for some reason, I just couldn't get up. My whole body was on fire and I felt so dizzy. Luckily, this man wasn't going to the pool. He wanted to be let into the sauna and came back with a lifeguard. I saw them walking this way and immediately jumped up to grab my cousin. I knew now that for sure she had locked us in there because she pulled out her keys to unlock the door and let the man in. I didn't want to take any chances of us being trapped in there any longer, so as the man was trying to walk in, I was trying to shove our way out. As we were going out, the lifeguard started trying to shut the door and push us back in. The man was clearly confused about what was going on and said, I think they want out. The lifeguard let out a sigh and opened the door fully as we ran as fast as we could into the changing room. We only had about 10 minutes before a grandmother was supposed to pick us up. We were both so shaken by what just happened that we didn't say anything to each other as we got dressed on the car ride home. When we got back to the house, my parents were making us dinner. I told them the story of what just happened. They thought that I must have been exaggerating, and they didn't believe me. I truly think that woman was going to let us cook alive in there. The only bit of doubt that I have is what would have happened if we actually died. She obviously would have gotten the blame. What was her endgame? I'm 21 now, and I think about this interaction all the time, and when I'm in small spaces or I get too warm, I still have panic attacks. No one believes this story, and I get it. It's pretty absurd. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to ask for opinions, but do you think that this could have been some crazy misunderstanding, or do you think that she really just left us in there to die? And why? So, to the lifeguard at the YMCA, please, let's not meet again. I dodged being murdered by my psychotic roommate just by a hair, with real news articles. I'm a 36-year-old female in Sweden. I have worked in mental health care for the last 18 years, mainly with people with psychotic illnesses like schizophrenia. I was working at a group home for 9 years, and we're very close with my coworkers there, especially 2 females. The last few years I worked there, another female started working there. Let's call her M. And the 4 of us grew very close. She was very timid, shy, friendly, and we got along well. She was, however, often on long-term sick leave because of her own mental health issues, so we didn't meet much at work. But she always showed up at our after-work dinner, so we continued to stay in touch even when she wasn't well enough to work full-time. She told us that she had a history of schizophrenia herself, just like the patients we were treating, but that she was medicated and hadn't had any psychotic episodes for years. Since I have an education in psychiatry and a long experience with schizophrenia, I have no judgment towards people suffering from the illness, and it didn't bother me being friends with someone who had a diagnosis like that. And even after what I will tell you, I still feel the same way. In the summer of 2023, I had moved on to work at a new place, also within mental health, but this time forensic psychiatry, like a halfway house for mentally ill murderers, etc. The 4 of us stayed in touch and still met every now and then for dinner parties. M told us that she had been evicted from her apartment because of an incident where she had accidentally entered her neighbor's apartment in the middle of the night. She told us that in the huge apartment complex, the doors all look exactly the same, and that she simply walked in the wrong door by accident, and that the neighbors had created a scene out of pure drama and reported her to the police. I somehow felt that, while that sounded out of proportion to evict someone just for that, Perhaps the landlord took that kind of action because he judged her based on the medical history, and I felt bad for her. I questioned her if something else happened, and she claimed that it didn't, and that was the full story. In Sweden, it's very difficult to get a contract for an apartment when you have gotten evicted. You pretty much get blacklisted. Em asked me if she could move in with me, since she was literally on the street, literally homeless. I said, of course you can. I've always gotten myself into uncomfortable situations by saying yes instead of thinking about myself, and I had no idea how severe the situation would get when I said yes to Em. I live in a pretty small apartment. It's one bedroom that pretty much only fits a bed and a desk, a living room that fits a couch and a TV, no room for an extra bed, a small kitchen, and a small bathroom. I have 2 cats. We decided that Em was going to live in the living room, and I offered her to throw my couch out so she could have a bed there. And she said that she was fine with sleeping on the couch since it's comfortable enough. I insisted on giving her a bed, but she declined. There's a door between the living room and a bedroom, but between the living room and hallway, there's just an open arch, so she wouldn't have total privacy. I hung up a thick velvet curtain covering the arch so it at least gave her the sense of a door and more privacy than nothing. There's another door from my bedroom to the kitchen, so I have 2 doors to my bedroom. I have to have one of them open at night since my cats wants to go in and out. And they also have their litter boxes in the bathroom and food and water in the kitchen. I naturally kept the kitchen door open and not the living door open, since that's where Em lived and we wanted to keep our privacy somehow. She wasn't working at this time because she was on one of her long-term sick leaves. Well, I was working shifts, so sometimes I had to get up at 6 a.m. and sometimes I didn't get home till like 11 p.m. I have really severe insomnia and need to combine zolpidem, which is Ambien/Stilnoct, with Largene, which is promethazine. And even with this, I still wake up easily. I told her that I would appreciate if she could try to stay quiet those nights when I have to get up at 6 a.m. But that it's fine if she's loud when I'm off work or when I do the evening shifts. She was a heavy smoker and a coffee drinker, so I bought her a coffee machine. Yeah, I know, I'm a weirdo who don't drink coffee very often, so I didn't have one, to make her enjoy her living situation more. The coffee machine and the sink is placed right outside my bedroom door. The kitchen is very small. So the first night together, I had to get up at 6 for my shift. As usual, I had a hard time falling asleep. Em had been up several times that night to go out to smoke, and I woke up every time. At 5 a.m., she started making coffee, and since it's literally outside my bedroom door, I got wide awake from the sounds of it. I asked her in the nicest way possible why she was up this early, asking if she had any plans today. I mean, she's on sick leave, why not sleep at 5 a.m. if you can? And she just said that she couldn't sleep. I said, oh, I'm sorry. I would just appreciate if you could wait with making your coffee till 6 a.m. since I really need this last hour of sleep because of work. Adding to why I need my sleep is that I have epilepsy that gets really bad when I don't get enough sleep. I usually get a lot of seizures when I don't get at least 4 hours of sleep. I knew that I'd probably get seizures at work now, meaning that this day would be both stressful and potentially dangerous for me since there's a huge risk that I fall asleep and hurt myself. And it's not a good thing to get cramps and seizures among mentally unstable criminal clients who you're supposed to care for. I know that it's not an ideal situation to work in that field with my condition, and I can inform you all that I did quit after only 6 months. She said that she really wanted coffee with her cigarettes, but that she would want to try the wait next time I have to work. I accepted it and went on with my day, but things didn't get better. She continued to wake me up early in the morning and through the nights, and continued to promise to stop, but insisted that she really wanted coffee with her cigarettes. I suggested making the coffee the night before, or drinking iced coffee or Coke instead, but she didn't want it. I may add that she demanded for me to be silent at 10 p.m. because that's when she wanted to sleep, and I respected that. She used to get these moments of binge eating where she would empty my fridge and pantry from everything I had. I remember this one time when I had bought a big loaf of bread and she texted me 30 minutes after I left the apartment saying, "Hey, I'm sorry I ate your loaf of bread. I'll buy it back once I get the money." Like an entire loaf of bread in 30 minutes. I had told her when she moved in to feel at home and what's mine is yours, so I couldn't really get mad, but it started to annoy me for 2 reasons. It was getting kind of expensive since it was such huge amounts, and it was always in inconvenient times of the day, like after an evening shift when the store was closed, and I came home hungry, and she had emptied the kitchen from everything I'd bought the same day. Em had long, black hair that was everywhere, all over the sink, the floor, the bathtub. I'm no clean freak, but I think anyone could understand that this isn't the nicest thing to step in or see everywhere in your house. She also left her fingernails and toenails on the bathroom floor. There was also pee drops on the toilet seat every time she had been to the toilet. I saw a silverfish on my bathroom floor. Never ever seen one before. And they eat hair and skin and nails, so I figured this fella probably enjoyed life because of the new dirty condition my bathroom was in. At first, I didn't want to say it straight out because I thought it would hurt her, and I didn't want to make her uncomfortable, so I just put a broom and shovel in the bathroom to imply that we needed to sweep the floor more often. This didn't seem to work, so after a while I told her in the nicest way possible with a smile on my face, "Do you think we could try to clean the floor in the bathroom more often? We tend to lose some hair when we brush it off, and I'm afraid we might get pests. I saw a silverfish the other day. I don't want it to get worse." I always make sure to say we instead of you so she wouldn't feel attacked. She promised to think about it but never changed. I started dating a guy and was head over heels for him. He was also in a roommate situation, so we had a tough time getting any alone time. I asked Em if there's any chance that we could get one night to ourselves every now and then in the apartment, and that she of course would get the apartment to herself as well. She didn't like the idea and claimed that she had nowhere to go, no friends or family. Now, I wasn't asking her to leave the apartment for 24 hours, just a few hours, so we could get just some quality time together. She could just go to the library or take a walk or whatever. I was at work for 8 to 10 hours, 5 days a week, so she got a lot herself. One of my old coworkers realized that this was really tearing at my mood to never get any time for myself, and I started feeling really suffocated. She offered that Em could stay the night at her place. After all, they were friends too. Em said they didn't want to bother her, but we told her that she didn't. They're friends. She's more than welcome. And I really just want one night to myself and my guy. I didn't understand why she made such a big deal over leaving me in the apartment for just one night. She eventually accepted and spent the night there. I spent the night away the next week so she could get more alone time too. When I came home the next morning from my night away, I saw that my cat's water bowl was completely dried out. There was no spill on the floor, and it looked like it had been wiped out with a towel or paper. I had filled it to the brim just the night before. I asked her how this was possible, and she said that the cats must have tipped it out, but there was nothing on the floor, like I said. My cats are overly social and usually cuddle up with strangers after just a few minutes. I noticed that the cats withdrew from her more and more over time. In the last couple of weeks, they never left my bedroom except from when they ate or used the litter box. It seemed like they were scared of her, which I couldn't figure out since she was so timid. I had this old saucepan from the 60s that meant a lot to me. You probably wonder how a saucepan can mean a lot to someone, but it was my grandmother's, and it's the only thing I have that belongs to her. My mother used to cook for me with it when I was little, so it has a great nostalgic value to me. She burnt it one day and made no attempt to clean it. She just left it on the stove and went out to smoke. I found it ruined and cried. She didn't even say I'm sorry. She also broke dishes several times and didn't bother to replace them or apologize. This added to my frustration with her naturally. It had been probably gone 2 months now, and she kept waking me up at night, kept binge eating my food, never cleaned, never left the house, scared my cats, and ruined my things. I realized she stole my prescripted sleeping pills, lots of them as well, and I only get one per night. Not more or less, and as you already know, I really need them. I had 20 of them in my nightstand when I left for work. When I came home, they were gone. She denied, which is pretty hilarious since no one else could have been there. My frustration was getting heavy. The summer heat was strong, and I felt locked up in my tiny bedroom with my 2 cats, never getting any time to myself, never any alone time with the guy I was dating, except for once every 14th day. My apartment was messy, and she was stealing from me, etc. Out of nowhere, my old elementary school classmate texted me on Facebook asking me how I know Em. He had seen that I had posted on Facebook that we were roommates now. I told him that we were old coworkers and that she needed a place to stay because she got evicted. He said, "I know. Do you know why she was evicted?" "Yeah, she accidentally went into her neighbor's apartment." He said, "That's not the full story. She broke in and snuck up to their sleeping baby with a knife in her hand. But luckily, the father woke up and wrestled her down and managed to save the baby." I felt sick to my stomach. Could this be true? It would certainly explain why she was evicted, but it just sounded so horrible, and she is such a timid, nice girl. I had so many questions, but my friend had the full police report. Apparently, the couple that M had broken into was his ex-girlfriend and her family. It seemed that M had a psychosis during the break-in, but those parts weren't public. It was, however, clear to me that she'd been lying to me about what had happened, and about how long she had been mentally stable. I started getting quite paranoid now, and I was already frustrated with everything, and really wanted her to move out. We did, however, have a contract that she had 30 days notice. I knew that if I asked her in a harsh way, it would mean 30 days of chaos until she moves out, so I wanted to handle this as nicely as I could. I started looking for cheap hostels for her that I could suggest to her so she wouldn't be on the streets. I sat down with her and told her that I loved living with her and I feel really horrible for this, but I just miss my alone time, that the apartment is too small for 2 people. I said it wasn't personal, and that I wouldn't want to live with anyone right now, that I wished it would have worked out, that I am really sorry and hope we will remain friends. She looked crushed and said that it wasn't possible. I showed her the hostel I found and said that I understood that it wasn't the ultimate situation, but I really needed her to move out because I felt suffocated, and also the summer heat was making it, though, to always have the door to the bedroom closed, and that it was tough for me to not get my sleep, etc. She was okay. She was going to try to move out, but not until 30 days had passed, and I said of course. The first night after our talk, she got up and made her coffee at 2:30 a.m. I nearly had a mental breakdown. I was going to get up at 6 and couldn't go back to sleep. I asked her in the morning for probably the 10th time to not make coffee till I get up, but she didn't even answer me. She just sat in the sofa and stared out the window. I said, "M?" And she just kept staring. I was freaked out but left for work. She kept being weird, kept making a mess, kept waking me up, kept eating my food, and all I could think about was the incident with her and the baby and the knife. I eventually got so pissed off about being woken up by the coffee maker, so I plugged it out and stored it in my attic, which she had no access to. It may be childish, but I was getting so tired at this moment. My sleeping pills were stolen, and I was starting to feel like Edward Norton in the beginning of Fight Club. Well, the next night I woke up at 4 a.m. by her making coffee in a saucepan. Not my grandmother's saucepan, that one was ruined. I tried talking to her again, explaining the situation, but she just stared and didn't reply. Me being frustrated and on the tipping point took the saucepan and stored it in the attic as well. I know, but I was going crazy and just wanted her to stop with these nightly coffee routines and get the hint. The third night, I had the guy I was dating sleeping at our place because I was getting really paranoid now over her weird behavior. Not speaking with me, just staring into space. I woke up from my very light snooze by him poking me. He whispered, "Look," in the doorway. M was just standing silently staring at us. This was like a scene from a horror movie, with her long black hair over her face. I kid you not. I didn't say anything at first because I wanted to know if she just stood there for a second doing something by the door, but I realized after a while that she was actually just standing, like staring at us. It reminded me of the ending of Paranormal Activity when Katie just stares at Micah in the final scene. So I sat up and said, "What are you doing?" But before I could finish the sentence, she slammed the door shut, and I heard the sound of something metal falling on the floor and her running into the living room. I yelled out, "You need to leave," and started crying hysterically because this was turning into a fucking nightmare. Of course I didn't go back to sleep, and I was really happy that I had company that night. I just kept asking myself, had she done this before? Stared at me in my sleep? The next day when I got out of bed, I opened the door and she had slammed shut and saw a kitchen knife on the floor. So that was the metal sound I had heard before she ran off. I took all my knives and locked in the attic as well. I then asked a friend of mine to come to my house and be here when I tell her that she has to move out immediately. That I can't wait 30 days, 27 days. During the conversation, I really tried to stay calm. I know she has a mental illness. I know she means no harm, even though I was so frustrated I couldn't hate her. I was mostly scared and tired. She, however, didn't even answer when I talked to her. She just kept staring out the window. She left the apartment and sent me a text instead saying that I was disrespectful for bringing a friend over to her place. Nighttime came and I thought this would be a quiet night finally. No coffee maker or saucepans. But at 3 a.m. I woke up by her burning dry coffee powder in a frying pan. At this moment, I just felt terrified of her. Her face was dead. Her eyes were black. I suspected that she had gone into a psychosis. I stopped the fire and just ran off into the living room in silence. I knew she had an appointment with her psychiatrist the next day, and while she was away, I packed all her things. I then sent her a text telling her that she needed to pick them up and give me the keys back, and that I will give her money for a hostel the upcoming 26 days. She didn't reply. The guy I was seeing came to keep me company in case she would fight about it. She didn't. She left the keys without looking at us and left. Our coworkers, who were friends with us both, told me that she moved in with a guy she was dating, and she stayed there for a few weeks till she somehow amazingly got an apartment of her own. She started working again, and I was really happy to hear this. She seemed to do well. Then, in January of this year, one of our old coworkers told me that M had called her and told her that everything must burn, that she had a baby that she must save, and other delusional stuff. She had called 112, Swedish emergency number like 911 about this, but they hadn't taken it seriously. M had then proceeded to burn her entire apartment down because the voices in her head was telling her that she has to burn everything to save her friends and family. Her neighbors had tried to rescue her from the fire, but she had fought them off and ran back in and poured liquor on the fire to make it burn more. She was arrested and sentenced last week for aggravated arson. She will serve her time in a mental institution/prison for a long time, possibly forever. What's ironic is that she will probably be in the facility where I used to work, and end up where she used to work herself. My old coworker was a witness at the trial, and apparently she had stopped taking her medication because she thought it made her feel numb, and she thought she was stable enough to function without it. Apparently not. She had also stopped taking her medication the last few weeks when she stayed at my house. So when she stared blankly into space, she was going into psychosis. When she stared at me with the knife in her hand, when she burned the frying pan that last night, it's disturbing to think about what would have happened to me and my cats if she would have stayed, or if I would have been a heavy sleeper. I also think about what would have happened to that baby that she snuck into before she was evicted. And yeah, I know, it's crazy that I didn't just throw her out by then. It was complicated. The reason why I haven't been able to talk about it with my friends is because they sympathize with her and have minimized my experience, and they think that I make a bigger deal out of it than I believe it has been. I sort of understand it since they have never seen the darkness in her eyes that I saw those last couple of days. Update, May 16th. I just remembered some other things that I wanted to add it to the post. There were several times when I was going to work early in the morning as she occupied the bathroom by taking long baths. I patiently tried to wait till the last minute before knocking and asking her if she could get up and get back in after I had gotten ready and left for work. Just another thing that added to my frustration. I felt really ill one time when she was staying there. I didn't know at the time what it was, but I woke up early in the morning one day feeling very nauseated. On my way to the bathroom, I literally shit myself and threw up at the same time. It takes like 10 seconds to get to the bathroom, so you can imagine how bad it was when I didn't even make it, LMAO. I had a really high fever and kept throwing up and shitting myself all morning, and anyone who has been this ill would understand that you want the bathroom to yourself. Actually, I think it's pretty understandable that you'd want to be completely alone when you're this ill. My head was spinning and I was nearly hallucinating from the high fevers. One random thing I laugh about today is that it was Eurovision week, and for some reason the flute solo from Moldova's song was stuck on repeat in my head when I was in and out of fever dreams. I have a hard time listening to it today, haha. Anyway, working in healthcare, I also have a natural instinct of not wanting to spread infections, so my first thought was that besides wanting to be alone, I didn't want to risk giving whatever this was to M. So I begged her the moment I noticed I was ill to please leave for her own sake. I could barely speak because it made me throw up that easily. Our friend in common had asked her to water her plants that week, so she had the keys to her place and could have been alone there. M refused to leave, and I swear, if I had the energy to slip out of the window and fall to my death, I would have, but I couldn't. I was half sitting / half laying on the toilet with a bucket in my lap, my my head sort of resting in the bucket of puke because I couldn't hold it up of the high fever, and I just begged through whispers for her to leave so she wouldn't be ill. I told her, "What if you get sick soon too? We can't share the toilet. I'll be here all day. You just go to her place before it's too late, please." Eventually she left, pissed at me. It turned out I had a severe case of food poisoning, and I was well again after 2 days, but my God, the fact that she refused to leave is something I felt I had to add to the story because it made me so frustrated too. I also went through our conversations and saw me asking her how long the door had been closed. That reminded me that she used to shut my cats inside my bedroom while I was away at work or whatever, so they couldn't eat, drink, or use the litter boxes. She claimed she just recently closed it because she was trying to sleep, but I remember she did it in the middle of the day one time the last few days too. And alright guys, that wraps up the terrifying true Reddit stories. I really hope you enjoyed this video because these stories were very interesting and, like I said, all true, so it makes them very scary in my opinion. But let me know what you'd like to see in the future, what type of stories. What else would you like me to cover? What did you like about this video? What did you not like about this video? And thank you so much for watching to the very end of this video. If you haven't liked the video, please like the video. It helps a ton. And also subscribe to the channel. It's the channel's goal to get 500,000 subscribers. So please subscribe. And all right, enough with the outro. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time.
For better or for worse, being obese and obnoxious is a surefire way to place yourself into the internet's crosshairs. Some handle it well, others not so much. But what happens when these people get their own TV show that paints them in a positive light and sweeps their wrongdoings under the rug, gaining them hundreds of thousands of supporters in the process that have no idea who they truly are? These are the 1,000-Pound Sisters, and their story from being internet memes to reality TV stars. Tammy and Amy Slayton were born in Kentucky in 1986 and 1987, and were the youngest of 5. In order to keep them fed, their mom had to work 3 jobs. This sounds like a joke about them eating a lot, but I promise it's not. But I will say, I guess their mom did a great job given how they turned out. During this period, the sisters were mostly cared for by their grandmother, but once she passed away in 1999, the two had to take care of themselves. This meant they often ate unhealthy microwave meals and put on a lot of weight as they grew up, which led to bullying from their classmates. Worse yet was the fact that at one point, Tammy gained so much weight that she couldn't walk without an aid. Once they got out of high school, Tammy went on disability, while Amy attempted to join the workforce, although she eventually gave up and started collecting government checks as well. In 2010, when she was 23 years old, Amy was arrested for shoplifting, which she later explained was because she'd stolen an $8 book, but was caught once the store sensors beeped when she tried to walk out. This is a bit strange, as not every item is tagged to trigger the sensors. Tags are usually reserved for more expensive items, like clothing and things of that sort. Secondly, I honestly didn't expect Amy to be such an avid bookworm that she'd go as far as to steal books, but you never know. She looks like she could read Dostoevsky and Tolstoy, maybe even both at the same time. It's also worth noting that, while we don't know how much she weighed during her teenage years, the arrest record registered her as weighing 320 pounds at a measly 5'3". Even this early on, we already see most of the elements of what made the Slayton sisters infamous: misdeeds that cross into potentially illegal activity, lies to keep up appearances, and never taking responsibility for their own actions. A year later, their YouTube channel was created, but it was pretty inactive until 2014, when they started hopping on trends from the time, like the Salt and Ice Challenge or the Jelly Bean Challenge. While Tammy appeared in these videos, it was very clear that Amy was the star of the show, and over the course of the next 10 months, they uploaded 128 times, averaging out to a video every 3 days or so. Despite the sheer quantity of videos, their channel wasn't getting any attention, but it all changed when they uploaded the Chubby Bunny Challenge, which, if you somehow don't know about this, is essentially when you put a bunch of marshmallows in your mouth and say the phrase Chubby Bunny after each one.
Chubby Bunny.
This video of them performing the challenge currently sits at over 2.5 million views, but the comments are turned off because they were all ridicule and jokes about them. Obviously, the appeal of this video for the majority of viewers wasn't how well Amy and Tammy performed the challenge, but more so people gawking at their unique physicality. But this isn't to say that they only got negative feedback. There were actually plenty of positive reactions. Plenty of people saw the video and simply saw two people enjoying their lives and didn't have a problem with it. However, it did get memed to all hell, to the point that around the time the video came out, if you googled fat forehead, Tammy popped up. So you can imagine there was a pretty hefty volume of people making fun of them. But the sisters didn't let it get to them. Instead, they immediately capitalized on it, setting up an Amazon wish list almost entirely filled up with junk food, as well as Cinnamon Toast Crunch lip balm. Unfortunately, this dynamic duo was temporarily separated, as Tammy was taken to a care facility to help her lose weight until she got down to 500 pounds, which is a pretty good goal considering she went in at a little over 700. During her stay at the clinic, Amy really solidified herself as the protagonist, while Tammy was permanently relegated to being the side character. Around this time, Amy also revealed some things about herself to her newfound audience, such as her toxoplasmosis diagnosis, which caused her to be legally blind. According to her, her blindness was progressing to the point where she'd be completely blind by the age of 35. While the toxoplasmosis had nothing to do with her weight, it really didn't take a doctor to figure out that both sisters were extremely unhealthy. In April of 2015, Amy notified their audience that Tammy had gone back to the hospital, this time over a severe case of pneumonia that required her to be on a breathing machine. And then she said this.
I set up a trust fund, a GoFundMe account. If y'all could donate a penny, nickel, dime, I would be so happy.
According to Amy, the purpose of the GoFundMe was to pay for medical bills and funeral expenses, as she believed Tammy was on her deathbed and would require an extra large casket. In the same video, it was also revealed that Tammy had gained over 100 pounds after her return from the clinic. At the time, the video was received pretty well, and a lot of people were willing to pitch in a couple dollars for Tammy. But according to reports from around that time, the audience's pity soon turned into confusion and then suspicion, when just a few days later, a video apparently went up showing the two sisters at home talking and laughing like there was nothing wrong. For a time, it certainly looked like they had scammed their own audience, but it's possible this was an older video Amy uploaded by mistake, as over the next few months, there were multiple updates coming directly from the hospital room, showing Tammy was clearly not in good shape. During this time, the comments, likes, and dislikes were also all turned off, probably to stop the rumors about them potentially scamming their audience. But what is suspicious either way is that once it became clear Tammy was going to survive, they stopped talking about the GoFundMe page. And once Tammy came back, things went completely back to normal, with no comment on the page at all. But they did have a very unfortunate event, being that Amy's dog passed away, to which Amy actually uploaded a tribute video about him, which received a lot of empathy from most people, although some of them jokingly speculated that they had eaten the dog. The next notable upload was a vlog announcing they were moving out of their family's house due to a disagreement with their stepfather that culminated in a physical altercation. The plan was to move in with their brother while they look for a new place, and the original GoFundMe for Tammy's health was then repurposed to be about raising funds to move and buy furniture. Once again, Amy and Tammy were separated, and Amy was doing the channel all on her own with the occasional visit from her sister. At this point, the channel was actually steadily growing, and whether from the lack of her family's bad influence, or because she couldn't afford as much junk food now that she had to pay for her own apartment, Amy announced that she had lost over 60 pounds as a result of a diet, although the good news was unfortunately paired with a diabetes diagnosis. Because of the significant weight loss, Amy decided it was time to change her life, and finally look for a partner. On Twitter, she regularly invited people to meet up with her, saying that her man had to be able to handle love bites. And also at the same time, an interesting thing was happening. Amy and Tammy had initially gotten big, well, you know, on YouTube, because of two different groups, one of which who actually liked their videos and kind of felt bad for them, and another group that simply wanted to make fun of them. But at this point, the channel began to develop an entire troll ecosystem, dead set on scrutinizing the sisters' personal lives. So of course, it took them no time to find Amy's profile on OkCupid, which was named Goddess of Hope. In her extensive bio, she described herself as a sexy, wild, and fun girl, looking for a long-term relationship with either a redneck, a thug, or a gothic boy between the ages of 27 and 35. Basically, her ideal partner was King Cobra, if he came from a hood in the Appalachian Mountains. Imagine their their kids. To further her love quest, she posted some pretty suggestive photos on Facebook, and while a lot of people were supportive, her own sister called her out, accusing her of looking like a streetwalker, which actually seems to be a running theme in Tammy's comments, as she often speculates that her sister works with glitter on, as well as other euphemisms about her being a hooker. Regardless of what anyone thought about her appearance, Amy was expecting some serious action, and even talked about how she carried condoms in her purse, just in case. And eventually, she did find her man, announcing on Facebook that her new boyfriend Alex gave really good foot rubs and brought balance to her world. But a week later, she was single again, claiming he stopped answering her phone calls, but would pick up if she called from another person's phone, meaning he had probably blocked her number. Despite the love life not being so successful, the YouTube channel was hitting new milestones, as she uploaded a video titled The Power of Makeup, which went on to become her most viewed video at almost 8 million views. Funnily enough, the video is just a sped up recording of her putting makeup on one half of her face, and 1/3 of the video doesn't even have audio. Again, the audience here was mixed. While a lot of the commenters are saying body positive things about how she looked great either way, plenty of people were also saying that the makeup made no difference. However, today you won't find any negative comments, as Amy personally curated the comment section to remove any trolls or meanness. The good news is that the makeup was apparently good enough to get her another date, although this also went awry as her man got drunk and angry on the first date and left her at the motel room. So I guess in a way it wasn't that much of a failure if they made it that far. The man she went on a date with actually came out to defend himself on Facebook, saying the reason he left was because Amy kept biting him and telling him that she loved him, neither of which were reciprocated or enjoyed. In response, Amy claimed that the man was poorly endowed, to which a friend of his replied saying, "You wasn't talking like that last night. When we came to get him, you was crying, wanting him to stay after you bit him all over his upper body. You psycho, fat-ass, Twinkie-eating bitch." Amy went on to make a video about the incident, reframing the bites as attempted hickeys, and then doxing the man in her comment section. Additionally, the guy in question was revealed to be 19 years old, which became relevant once a family member of his took to their comments to allege that she bought him alcohol and left out the fact that she'd previously contracted an STD, both of which are not good things to do to anyone. The comment concluded with a threat of a lawsuit if the video wasn't taken down, and although that lawsuit was actually filed, it seems like nothing ever came of it. However, this drama really changed people's perception of Amy, as they saw a darker side of her that was willing to lie and manipulate in order to get her way. Another manifestation of this is her next repurposing of the same GoFundMe page she used for the move and Tammy's pneumonia, but this time she changed the page to be about buying a MacBook for $10,000. MacBooks don't cost 10 grand, and it's pretty unclear how that would even improve her videos, since every video she'd made up until that point was simply a video recording of her talking. As people began wondering what all of that money was really going to, she announced that she'd bought a new van, and for some, this pretty much confirmed that she was scamming her fans. It definitely didn't help that in response to these claims, she deleted the GoFundMe page along with every video that mentioned it, and after that, someone who claimed to have known both sisters personally posted about her, saying that he worked with Amy in a call center. This user also shared some interesting details about Amy, such as her either outright refusing to eat anything or eating very little at work. However, when she was at home, she and Tammy ate the equivalent of 2 weeks of groceries in one sitting. That is, whenever the sisters weren't throwing temper tantrums and fighting with each other. He also added that while Amy was very self-aware that she had a problem, Tammy was not. If anything, she thought she looked better than other people. Regardless, both sisters were also described as stinking of body odor and fecal matter, with Tammy having an additional sickly sweet odor, which is just, great. Lastly, this user claimed that while Amy was just smart enough to get through high school, Tammy had an IQ of 78, which made her just 8 points shy of being considered disabled. Coincidentally, she also happened to say the N-word a lot, openly opposed interracial dating, and accused the poster in question of being gay for not wanting to bang her. While there's no evidence that this user was telling the truth, these claims are so funny that I kind of hope they are. But a lot less funny than that is Amy's next bit of online controversy. In a video titled My Bite Marks, she told a story about how her brother's dog bit her arm after she left him in a camper for about a half hour. The dog was then taken to a facility to be observed for 14 days, during which they'd ascertain whether the dog could be reintegrated into another family or had to be put down. With the audience now aware that Amy liked to lie to make herself look better, people grew pretty suspicious that she told a heavily biased version of this story. One commenter went as far as to figure out where the dog had been put, only to figure out that the German Shepherd was extremely well behaved and very likely to be adopted because he showed no signs of aggression, a sign that Amy was probably the reason for the dog acting out in that way. And potentially she was lying about her story. A couple days later, she uploaded a video showing the inside of her camper before she was going to paint it. People quickly pointed out that there was no air conditioning or fans in the camper. Realizing that her piling controversies were reaching a fever pitch, Amy uploaded a video titled Honest Truth, in which she talked about the dog situation and the GoFundMe page. She first claimed that the dog was in an air-conditioned space and had water to drink, bank, meaning the attack was not her fault whatsoever. Then she claimed to have given all of the GoFundMe page's proceeds to her mother, who used it to pay bills while Tammy was in the hospital, although she didn't provide a single receipt, claiming her mom was looking for them. This was a GoFundMe page, so unless they paid the hospital by withdrawing all the money in cash, this should be as easy as producing a bank statement, so in all likelihood, Amy is lying here. While a lot of people recognize that Amy was not the sharpest tool in the shed, it was clear that whenever she was confronted about something she did that was shady, if not potentially illegal, like defrauding donors and claiming to not know where all the money went, she played up her stupidity, almost as if to get people to give up trying to wrangle her into giving a straightforward answer. Given that she's intelligent enough to set up a GoFundMe page and attach it to a payment processor, she's definitely capable of showing the processor's payment history and showing it to her audience. At the very least, she's definitely more capable of it than her elderly mother, who most likely can't even use a computer. The real issue is that she just does not want to do it, possibly because all that GoFundMe money was now conspicuously van-shaped, and she wasn't willing to sell it to refund the donors. She then argued that the idea of repurposing the page to ask for a MacBook was actually her friend's, and she promised to pay people back as long as they could provide proof of payment. Now, this video received a lot of backlash because Amy was blatantly blaming everyone else for her controversies. Commentary YouTuber Optimus estimated that she was definitely making money from YouTube at this point.
So Amy and Tammy Slayton run their channel, which for some reason only has one of their names, which is Amy, but that's besides the point. So on this channel they do food reviews, fan mail openings, makeup box openings, product reviews, and animal abuse stories.
Which begged the question, why was she asking for money from her viewers? Why did she claim to need it? Amy eventually took down the Honest Truth video due to the backlash and made a new update titled Proof, showing partial receipts of her sending money to 2 people, followed by what she refers to as proof of how she bought her camper and proof of her YouTube earnings, which came in the form of an email from an agency offering to buy her Power of Makeup video for 10 grand, as well as an unopened indistinct envelope. Neither of these made any sense, as you can probably conclude, and it didn't really convince anyone. The comment section was so aggressively filled with backlash that she ended up turning off the comments and hiding the likes and dislikes. Today, comments are allowed, but there are only 5 of them, the only 5 positive ones. A few days later, the friend on whom she blamed the MacBook project idea on, Ashley, responded saying that not only was Amy lying about them being friends, she also lied about how much money the campaigns had made.
Starting with the fact that in that video, you talked about me like I was your best friend. Like we're good ass friends. I'm not mad at you anymore. There's no drama involving the situation anymore. But honey, that is so incredibly far from the truth, because every single time I hear the words Amy Slayton get brought up anywhere, a deep burning rage builds up inside of me because of what you've done to not only me, but everyone else who felt bad for you and your family because of what you told us, saying that your sister was incredibly sick, on the edge of death, to the point where you made a GoFundMe for her casket, Amy. And that never, ever came out to be true whatsoever.
While the claimed amount made from them was $13, Amy allegedly had made over $800. Ashley also cast doubt on Amy's stories about being bit and having toxoplasmosis, but her theories were never officially addressed as far as I can tell, and Amy just went about her business, finding herself a brand new boy toy named Matthew, telling a story about how they went out to Taco Bell and then exploded the mall. Her words, not mine. Despite their powerful chemistry, they broke up a day later, which really upset Amy because she needed a date for her brother's wedding. Amy then said that she had lowered her standards for him, followed by her sycophantic followers attacking the guy for having rotten teeth, prompting him to make videos defending himself, of course to no avail, as Amy had a force field of adipose tissue that deflected all criticism. A few days later, she made a video titled Going Through a Breakup, in which she uses the 5 stages of grief to describe the process of getting over a relationship, which lasted 2 days. She then went on to explain that the breakup actually wasn't her fault. Instead, it happened because of the incessant attacks on the guy coming from her fans, which she was very apologetic for and didn't intend to happen. Thankfully, she didn't have too much to be sad about because her channel reached yet another subscriber milestone, and she began selling off items that people mailed to her, which were usually makeup. Now, Matthew did eventually resurface, but only to call Amy disgusting and claim he didn't even know what she looked like before they met up, implying that he was catfished. Around the same time, Ashley also made an update to her inquiries into Amy's history of defrauding people and weaponizing her following to attack those she disliked. This time, she showed DMs between them where Amy repeatedly promised to get receipts for the payments made to the hospital where Amy was treated, only to never deliver, essentially confirming that the money was used for different purposes. Amy never addressed this. Instead, she posted a video called My Thoughts, where she claimed that someone tried to scam her by claiming to have donated to the GoFundMe and wanting their money back. This story is probably untrue, but it doesn't really matter nearly as much as an odd statement she made halfway through the video.
I'm trying my best to pay people back, and I know I've been wrong. I should not throw receipts away. But in my head, I wasn't thinking, well, these receipts might come to bite me in the ass. You know, I wasn't thinking that. It was a simple mistake, you know.
This is the first documented instance of Amy saying she herself threw the receipts away, when every other time she talked about it, she claimed her mother had them somewhere and she was looking for them. Unsurprisingly, the video did very little to change anyone's minds. In fact, if anything, it only reinforced the narrative that she had defrauded her donors and then lied about it. Right after that, she suddenly announced she would delete all of her social media accounts, only to walk it back immediately. So instead, she did the next best thing, censoring her comment section, making sure it was squeaky clean, while keeping her likes and dislikes disabled. Sadly for her, the views don't lie, and around this time, she rarely cracked 10,000 views, despite having a much larger follower base than a year prior. Keep in mind, her audience was originally composed of people who genuinely watched her for her makeup tutorials and vlogs, so they definitely didn't have a high bar and were not judgmental about the content they supported. What caused her drastic loss in viewership was the fact that no matter how many times she addressed the GoFundMe situation, or any of her controversies really, Amy completely refused to take accountability or provide evidence for her claims. Despite how tolerant her viewers were, they weren't so tolerant that they'd let her get away with it. At least, not at this point in time. In a ploy to get her fans back, Amy finally reunited with Tammy on camera, marking the first time that the audience even saw Tammy in over a year. They then did a question and answer together to celebrate the channel's 65,000 subscriber milestone, and during it, it was pretty noticeable that Tammy didn't want to be there, almost as if Amy was recording the video against her wishes. The viewers also picked up on Tammy's snarky answers, concluding that the sisters probably didn't like each other that much anymore. Ultimately, the video was extremely awkward, and it didn't really work in getting back any of their fans. Instead, a couple of months later, Amy tried out live streaming, which turned out to be more of a challenge than she expected because she couldn't figure out how to press the start streaming button. But fortunately for us, she eventually found it, and although the stream hasn't been archived, we did find out that she once again found herself a new boyfriend. She called him David, and on the same day the stream went up, he also broke up with her. Teary-eyed, she released a video blaming her audience for harassing him, but the video was deleted shortly after, most likely due to the negative response. She then released a follow-up titled "I'm Sorry," explaining that she understood now that online harassment had nothing to do with it, but she still couldn't quite admit David broke up with her because of, well, her being her. Instead, she blamed his ex-girlfriend, I suppose to make herself feel better. A few days later, she went on a podcast with Stay Negative, where she attacked someone called Bunny Rabbit, a YouTuber and a convicted sex worker, claiming that she had been running a long con on Amy and was behind the attempted scam. But about a week later, a channel called Flat Out Entertainment released a video on Amy that's since been deleted. He later revealed he had actually been contacted by Amy herself, who wasn't too fond of him using her name for views. Not only that, but she also asked him to cover the aforementioned Bunny Rabbit, saying she was the one responsible for all of the controversies surrounding the GoFundMe. Flat Out Entertainment didn't take this very seriously since he was familiar with the situation and knew that Bunny had nothing to do with the GoFundMe scam. Perhaps realizing that pinning it all on Bunny wouldn't do the trick, Amy made a rant video about a girl who had been making videos on her.
Wanna talk shit about me? I only use up my name in her videos? All the titles, Amy, Amy, Amy. Because a bitch can't get views by herself, so she has to use my name.
While Amy never named this random attacker, we later found out it was someone named Trisha, who's going to become relevant later on, so just keep that name up there in your noggin. Around the same time, Amy also revealed that she'd been seeing someone for about a month. This someone was Michael, who unlike any of her other boyfriends, was very well acquainted with her, as the two knew each other since he was 13 and she was 8. According to her, they were dating during this period, had their first kiss with each other, and stayed together until she was 13 and he was 18. While they supposedly never had any intimate contact, she did say that she saw his, privates, which I hope was in a non-sexual context. As it turned out, Michael was quite a character in and of himself, having a criminal record for domestic violence. But during this period, she didn't upload too much, until she posted a boyfriend and girlfriend tag with him, with the two seeming happy being together at the time. This wasn't the only fad Amy hopped on though, as in the same month, she released a video where she read hate comments, during which someone brought up the fact that her boyfriend had been convicted of domestic violence.
Or like, my ex just punched me in the face. I'm not even talking about him being like that, because that was just one time video, and he regrets it, and he's sorry for it, and he would never do that to me, because he knows I would beat the shit out of him. But for real, I'm not even going to talk about it, because it's none of your damn business who I date,
And finally, the accusations about the makeup people got enough traction that she decided to make a video to deny it. I guess she forgot that she publicly offered it on Facebook, but you know what, you can't blame a gal for trying to make an extra buck on the side. She did eventually address this, claiming that she only talked about selling it but had no intention of actually doing it, which is about as good of an excuse as EDP's cupcake story. Amy then announced she's got a big bag of makeup that she'll donate to a women's shelter in her desire to spread the joy around. The last relevant part of this video is Amy profusely apologizing to someone named Kimber and alluding to her stepfather being sick, which was very confusing for a lot of viewers who had no idea who Kimber was or the context of any of this. It turns out that Kimber was another small YouTuber who was planning to collab with Amy, but after spending $3,000 buying makeup, jewelry, hair dye, wigs, and traveling to where Amy lived, Kimber made the mistake of asking Amy for $50, which prompted her to have a breakdown and say she had no money. After that, the collab went downhill, as after spending all of that money and traveling 10 hours, Kimber was supposed to be met by Amy at a hotel, but Amy never showed up. When contacted, Amy began making excuses about her stepdad being sick. Now at first, this wasn't even a big deal since Kimber was going to stay there for several days, but after 2 full days passed and Amy continued to be out of reach, the realization set in that she was never going to show up. Concurrently with this bit of drama, a Twitter account believed to be Amy's was beefing with a girl called Truthfully Trisha, although when Amy addressed it, she claimed she didn't have a Twitter account and that the account with her name was actually ran by Trisha herself. Now, despite how often Amy lies about her detractors, she happened to be telling the truth in this case. You see, Trisha is another small makeup YouTuber who released a critical video about Amy, and after being unceremoniously shot down by Amy and her much bigger audience, she decided to make an account impersonating Amy and send her mean stuff to make Amy look bad. She even went as far as to have an entire Twitter DM argument with herself, wherein Amy is portrayed as a lesbian for whatever reason. She also got a domain of Amy's name that redirected to her YouTube page. Once Trisha realized her smear campaign was transparent and people got on her case about it, she claimed someone else had impersonated Amy and trolled her. That didn't help her either, and people continued to hound her for the next couple of weeks and start combing through her past. They found out she had a history of creating Facebook pages, including one called Catch a Bully, where she was ironically exposed for being a bully herself and even spreading fake rape allegations, all to get people's attention. Another of her egregious lies was a claim that she'd been suffering from cancer, although she didn't even put in the effort to keep the cancer consistent, oscillating between breast cancer and uterine cancer. These sleuths scrutinizing her online presence even found a couple videos of Trisha pranking her mom by pretending to be caught in a hurricane, although it's not funny as much as it's just off-putting. With all of this info out there, Trisha threw a fit and began live streaming almost non-stop to try and dunk on the haters, accusing them of putting her and her family at risk.
I can't believe this. Someone just ordered a pizza while I'm having an anaphylactic reaction to black pepper. No, I didn't order this.
You didn't order this?
Please go away. No.
Okay.
I'm waiting for the ambulance. Yes, ma'am. My husband.
Unlike Amy, who is dumb, manipulative, but ultimately a normal person, Trisha seemed to be genuinely unhinged to a clinical degree. Amy was understandably freaked out by the situation and made a video about it, explaining how Trisha was stalking her and everyone she knew, and even made a fake dating profile using information from a friend of hers to try and break up his marriage. In the video, she also threatened legal action against Trisha, and a few days later, an outside source confirmed Amy was indeed looking into hiring a pro bono lawyer, which is a lawyer that essentially works for free until they win. After that, a cease and desist letter was sent to Trisha, which isn't really a cease and desist, as people quickly noticed it was a direct rip of an internet template of a cease and desist letter, including brackets in the text that should have been replaced. But the days after the letter was sent were marked by silence from Amy's end, and when she did come back, she was extremely paranoid and having panic attacks over cars driving past her house that she thought were recording her. At this point, she had gotten over Trisha's antics and instead was just generally paranoid. Meanwhile, Trisha was getting increasingly psychotic, streaming constantly and losing her mind to the point that she actually got invited onto Dr. Phil.
Memorial Day of 2017, I was live streaming and I had a breakdown. John was visiting his family in Atlanta, so I live streamed for over 8 hours straight. There was a moment where I smeared fake blood on me. It reminded me of the part of me that died when I was raped as a young girl.
Sadly for her, the attention didn't last nearly as long as the insanity, as she fell back into obscurity. Today, she does OnlyFans, and based on her begging for money in some of the posts, I'm not so sure it's going well. As for Amy, things went back to normal. She attempted to branch out with her content and made an Outlast Let's Play, in which she recorded her TV with the same camera she used to film her videos. But what's more important about this period is that she moved in with Michael, which meant that he would would now randomly appear in a bunch of videos from that point onward, either as a proper guest or just awkwardly sitting in the background as if he was already in the room when Amy barged in and started recording. One strange thing people noticed was that after she moved in with him, the uploads became a lot more infrequent, as she often went on multiple week-long hiatuses, which was very unusual for her. She would typically upload almost every day. Based on the way they interacted with each other, a lot of the fans speculated Amy was secretly unhappy with the relationship, with some going as far as to suggest that he was doing something horrible to her. However, there was no proof of any bad behavior, and Amy certainly wasn't giving any hints that her and Michael were at odds, as she basically praised him as Jesus every time his name came up. And eventually, Michael took up her hobby, streaming himself on his YouTube channel, which Amy proceeded to shout out and promote. Although the lack of uploads from her was concerning, it wasn't so concerning that people continued to pay attention, and during this period, they lost a lot of viewers. At one point, she did come back to try and explain her near total absence from YouTube, clarifying she was away due to a family situation that she didn't want to get into.
But no, I'm not dead. No, nobody died. No, me and Michael are more in love than we ever have been. If I was in an abusive relationship, I got a head on my shoulders to say, get the fuck out of there. You know what I'm saying?
As funny and bizarre as Amy's situation is, it was definitely relieving to get confirmation that there wasn't anything bad going on, however unreliable of a narrator she was. While most of the speculation regarding Michael tended to be negative, he did have a positive effect of keeping Amy out of online drama, I guess because she finally had someone to interact with in real life, so she didn't go looking for it online. At this point, the couple were getting ready to get married, and things seemed to be looking up for Amy. But what about Tammy? During years of Amy being chronically online, Tammy stayed consistently out of the spotlight, only updating her Facebook page. In 2017, she did post about trolls making accounts on dating websites with her info, which she claimed was an attempt to make her want to do something drastic. This is relevant because she punctuated her post with FKYT, suggesting that unlike Amy, the people making fun of her online did actually get to her, hence her absence. But that all changed when she made her own channel in early 2018, and one of the first uploads on it had her covering the entire GoFundMe drama again from her perspective. In it, she reiterates that she did indeed get diagnosed with pneumonia, and that it got so bad she spent 3.5 weeks in a coma, almost dying, thus justifying Amy's fear that she was actually going to pass away. Since the GoFundMe was made while she was in a coma, she only found out about it later when she woke up, and when she did, she got very angry, saying that while she did appreciate the donations, it's not how she would have wanted her bills to get paid. But even with that, she still defends Amy, claiming she only ever used the money to pay bills and refunded everyone who reached out and proved they had donated. Now initially, the followers had a very positive impression of Tammy, seeing her as a much nicer and a more genuine person than Amy, who was reveling in online attention and getting herself tangled up in petty drama constantly. And with that, the sisters went back to frequently collaborating, and even did a live stream, this time without struggling to find the start streaming button. Things were going unbelievably well, as Amy and Mike moved into a new house together, and a good while later, announced they were about to tie the knot. Unfortunately, Tammy didn't show up to the wedding, and when people got on her case about not going to her own sister's ceremony, she made a video claiming that her stomach issues prevented her from doing so, which most people chalked up to an excuse, but some did believe. Besides the hiccup, for about a year, both sisters remained relatively drama-free, and it seemed like things might finally turn around for their online career. However, eventually, the same issues they had previously been facing began to surface. For starters, during a storytime video about going to the arcade with Amy and Michael, Tammy unwittingly revealed they had left Amy's dog locked in a hot car during their time there. Although she acted like it wasn't that big of a deal while she recorded, she deleted the video right after it was published, probably because she realized this wasn't going to turn out well. She managed to do it early enough that the comment sections on the following videos weren't completely infested with people bringing it up, but ultimately, everything is archived, and sooner or later, these things do get noticed. In another video from around the same time, she went over all the things she got for her birthday, which deeply aggravated the viewers since she complained about most of the things she got and continued to ask for more free stuff. In this moment, it seems that Tammy was set on a path that led her right back to her full-on lol cow status, and in all likelihood, she was going to take Amy and Michael down with her. But before this return to form could take place, something unexpected happened. Back in 2016, someone had reached out to Tammy claiming to be a TV casting producer in LA. It didn't look like a credible contact since it was made over Facebook, and what kind of professional does that, right? Well, as it turns out, a real one. A few years later, the two sisters were supposedly invited onto the show Family by the Ton, which seemingly went nowhere, but immediately after, TLC officially reached out to the sisters and offered to create a brand new show with them as the stars. stars. To promote it, TLC asked the sisters to announce their intention to get weight loss surgery on their channel, and a few months later, the TV show 1,000 Pound Sisters aired on TLC. The first season of the show was filmed throughout 2019, detailing their journey to get the surgery, and throughout it, we're even given a glimpse of how the sisters live. At the time, Amy weighed over 400 pounds.
406.
While Tammy was just over 600.
605.
While Amy could still get around and live as a relatively normal person, Tammy had to rely on everyone else to do even basic tasks. In a way, the show worked to completely reverse the roles that the sisters had been placed into prior. Now, Amy was seen as the likable and relatable one, as surprisingly, she was a much more charismatic person when she wasn't trying to make content for YouTube. Additionally, she seemed to put in some genuine effort to losing weight, exercising, and maintaining a halfway decent diet for someone her size. On the other hand, Tammy fully embraced a victim mentality, being completely uncooperative with the weight loss efforts and feeling sorry for herself all the time.
Come on, Tam. Who? I don't know that person. Shut up and do it. Just do it.
Interestingly, Amy's husband Michael also got a serious makeover by the show, previously seen by the fans as potentially abusive. But through the episodes, he can be seen being very supportive of both sisters, who, by the way, were both living with him at this point due to a health scare earlier that year. While this was odd and unexpected, the show didn't just paint Michael in that light arbitrarily. You could actually see him being of help to them, and you can't really fake that. But Michael isn't the only partner of theirs we get to see, as despite not being able to walk or even sit in a car due to how big she was, Tammy had somehow managed to get herself a boyfriend named Jerry. He was first mentioned on her YouTube channel, and in the show, he appears while the sisters are in Georgia, and soon after he has a romantic encounter with Tammy on the show.
Jerry came and see me last night, all the way from North Carolina. I was like so shocked. I was super nervous. Got some hickeys.
But he's only properly introduced in the following season, as the first season focuses on the core members of the family. Due to her efforts, Amy quickly managed to lose enough weight to qualify for the weight reduction surgery, but Tammy did not.
When I met Tammy, she was at 608 pounds. I gave her a goal of 58-pound weight loss, but she's only lost 21.
It seemed to motivate Tammy, as by the end of the first season, and about 2 months after Amy's surgery, she finally got under 600 pounds, 10 pounds away from being ready to get her operation.
When I started this journey, I weighed 608 pounds. But now, I made it down to 559. It feels great to be this close.
But things got a lot more dramatic in the show's second season, which took place during the height of the pandemic. With the sisters now stuck inside their house, Tammy went into a depression and put all of the weight back on.
Are you on there? Mm-hmm. All right.
Meanwhile, Amy resisted, continuing to lose weight.
It's been 4 months since I had weight loss surgery. So far, I lost 124 pounds.
Frustrated, Tammy's doctor sent her to a different doctor, just giving up entirely. And in the interim between doctors, she gained even more weight than previous. An extremely concerning development due to the many life-threatening health problems she faced just a while prior.
So we're at 644.5 right now.
As for Amy, her weight loss wasn't the only good news, as she finally had the opportunity to fulfill one of her deepest desires, having a child.
I'm pregnant.
After her surgery, the doctor had warned her that while she would be able to conceive, it wouldn't be advisable to do so for the next 2 years. But just a few months later, she was pregnant. As you can imagine, this did cause a few problems.
It's only been a couple months since I had the surgery, and Dr. Proctor told me not to get pregnant for 2 years.
But she went through with it regardless. Although the child had to be born through a C-section and was slightly underweight, the baby was still healthy. It was around this time that Tammy once again contracted pneumonia, this time as a consequence of COVID, but despite her being ill, she put on another 20 pounds, which is strange because people with these illnesses typically lose weight. It's not explicitly stated anywhere in the show, probably because it's too freaky even for TLC, but her continuous weight gain was actually a consequence of her boyfriend Jerry's feeder fetish. If you don't know what that is, consider yourself blessed and not as terminally internet poisoned as I am, I guess. Basically, it's when someone gets off on literally pushing someone to eat their way through obesity and into an early grave, actively lavishing in how debilitating all of it is. Very fortunately for Tammy, right as her obesity reached a peak and a rift began to form between her and her sister, she was sent to rehab.
Hey guys, I had given thought and I decided to go into a nursing rehab situation.
What's not so fortunate about this is it didn't happen because Tammy realized how disgusting Jerry's interest was. As a matter of fact, if it was up to her, she was going to stay with him. In reality, it's because Jerry felt guilt due to the fact that while dating Tammy, he was married to the mother of his 7 children and was actively cheating on her on national TV. If you're wondering, yes, Tammy knew the entire time. The extra 20 pounds Tammy put on right before going into rehab went away, as she lost 60 during her time there, but left the program early to try and lose weight on her own outside of the facility.
Ow! Remember what I told you? Just keep saying no.
Of course, she failed, as she walked right into the arms of yet another feeder, called BBW King, who proudly had never dated a woman below 300 pounds.
Currently dating the BBW King.
This marked yet another period of tension between Tammy and the rest of her family, as she was openly indulging in her self-destruction by dating feeders and slowly taking her own life through food. This also coincided with her behavior becoming increasingly dislikable, as she seemingly ruined every potentially positive family function, including an entire trip.
We're all in this together. I want to go home. I didn't want to come here.
She eventually did go back to rehab, but before she could get settled in there, she was sent to the hospital.
They're just telling us that her lungs have given up, and like her body is shutting down. So at this point, you know, we're facing making funeral arrangements for my little sister.
After 3 weeks there and a tracheostomy to allow her to breathe, she eventually went to rehab. Meanwhile, Amy and Michael had a second son, which caused their relationship to strain, as Amy felt Michael wasn't doing enough, and both were pretty unhappy. While in rehab, Tammy finally stuck to the program, and over 5 months, she lost over 100 pounds and found a boyfriend in the facility named Caleb, whom she married within a few weeks of meeting him while still there. Thankfully, this boyfriend was not a feeder and actually had respect for her medical issues, so the weight loss continued all the way down to 430 pounds. Sadly, when she left, her husband couldn't come with her since he was also hospitalized with similar issues. Once again, the sisters' roles were reversed, as Tammy was shown improving in all areas, while Amy began stalling in her progress, lashing out at her family until her relationship with Michael completely fell apart, culminating in divorce. All of that stress amounted in Amy hitting another one of her sisters, Amanda, while they had a fight about how Amy's kids were being raised. Now, the divorce wasn't really discussed in great detail on the show, I assume for legal reasons, but looking into it is pretty interesting. Amy had originally accused Michael of domestic abuse, only to withdraw the charge, and then the two of them filed restraining orders against each other. They were also barred from making any public statements about each other and agreed on joint custody of their 2 sons, meaning whatever the true story is behind the divorce, neither of them wanted to talk about it. A while after the separation, Amy was seen with a new boyfriend, Tony, which made a lot of people concerned about how bringing strange men around could possibly affect the kids. Again, despite the audience of the show being composed mostly of women who weren't half as judgmental as the internet trolls the Slayton sisters had to contend with, even they were picking up on very damning behavior patterns coming from Amy. But soon after the fight between Amy and Amanda, Tammy's husband Caleb passed away due to obesity-related issues. Remarkably, this didn't actually impact Tammy's resolve on losing weight, as she continued sticking to her program. What it did impact, however, was her mood, as she found herself fighting with Amanda constantly. The context of this fight is that Tammy was Amanda's tenant and thought that Amanda wasn't maintaining the place she was living in. Over the course of the episodes following this conflict, Tammy destroyed pretty much all the goodwill she had built up by being petty to everyone around her and refusing to accept a ceasefire with her sister. Due to how much she depended on her family, this was seen as pretty selfish and hypocritical of her, but it's at this point that the show's framing of the family really comes into question. For one, they would often neglect certain details, like, for example, Jerry's feeder fetish, and randomly drop the viewers into arguments between the sisters with no context, often editing the footage to make one of them look better. This is pretty par for the course with reality TV, but it becomes pretty egregious when, after being pretty tight-lipped and vague about Amy's divorce with Michael, they got really kind toward her. On the show, she was very deliberately portrayed as a caring, loving mother.
It's always been that doubt. What if I'm a bad parent? What if I can't give one baby time without the other baby time?
And whenever she did something negative, she was always given a lot of time to explain herself, and the context was always clearly in her favor. Of course, all reality TV is like this to some degree, but the way it was being done here, especially considering the fact that it could potentially affect her kids, looked a lot more deceptive in nature. For a while, the concerns about something insidious going on behind the scenes appeared to be mistaken, as time went on and nothing really changed about Amy and Tammy, even with the increased attention and mountains of money they got from the show. However, in early September of 2021, 1924, the police were called to the Tennessee Safari Park after one of the guests was reportedly bitten by a camel. Once they got there, they found Amy, who had apparently been bit by a camel so bad she had to go to the hospital. I don't really know how you get bit by a camel, but maybe this is karma for her biting that guy from all those years ago. The thing is, she was with her 2 sons who went along with her to the hospital, and the cops noticed that she smelled like weed, which gave them the bright idea to search her car. In it, they found 80 grams of the drug, which is illegal in Kentucky, as well as an unspecified amount of mushrooms. As a consequence, Amy and the man she was with, Brian, were promptly arrested for drug possession and 2 counts of child endangerment, while the bond was set at $10,000 per person, with both of them being paid for by Amy's brother Chris. Both of them pled not guilty, and interestingly enough, the owners of the zoo came out to accuse Amy of lying about having been bitten by a camel, as none of the security footage supported her claim, and based on the examination of the wound, it wasn't consistent with an animal bite and looked more like a cut she got. Given that they also described the man she was with as very erratic, it wouldn't be surprising to me if they were so out of their mind on drugs that she accidentally cut herself on an object and convinced herself it was a camel. Whether it was a camel bite or not, the point remains the same. Amy is seeing strange men and doing drugs in the presence of her kids, and usually that combination leads to the kids being put in all sorts of danger. That isn't to say she shouldn't be given a chance to redeem herself, but with 2 child endangerment charges, which can be felonies depending on the circumstance, she definitely stands to lose custody of her kids, in which case they would go to Michael. While Michael himself also has a conviction on his record, avid followers of the show have pointed out time and time again that their divorce was depicted in a very one-sided manner, trying to make Michael look negligent and lazy when he had already demonstrated himself to be neither of those things, diligently putting up with both of the sisters' insanity and doing his best to help around the house. Since then, not much of relevance has gone down with the sisters. Tammy continued to successfully lose a lot of weight and has been angling to get a surgery to remove her loose skin, but otherwise she's continued to be disliked by fans of the show for her attitude. Amy, meanwhile, is seen as more of a mixed bag, and most of the show now focuses on her struggles as a mother, typically framing it with a noticeable positive bias towards her, probably because they're trying to appeal to the middle-aged female demographic that composes a significant amount of the viewers. While their lives are far from the catastrophic dumpster fire that was coming their way during the GoFundMe and camper fiascos, there's no way to know if this is because they genuinely improved, or if the writers and editors behind the show were working overtime to make them look better. If it weren't for TLC, they wouldn't have hundreds of thousands of people supporting them. Instead, there would be a small army of detractors, picking apart at their lies and excuses, and they've already proved themselves to be terrible at sticking to their stories, and would undoubtedly fall apart without the safety net of the show. For the time being, we can only hope that their children aren't affected by whatever inevitable fiasco they're heading towards. But until then, I've been Turkey Tom, thanks for watching, and until next time, leave me alone.